September board work session to order. Welcome to all of our new members, and nice to see 11 people here. Our first item will be the consent items, and I'm sorry, Dr. Marzak is, just so everybody knows, he's in Gatlinburg for a conference, so for the Superintendent's Association, I believe. So he is joining us by Skype. So our first item is consent items. Anything anybody wants to discuss or potentially pull out of consent items? Seeing no. No, that's just the minutes, the school trips, and the use of facilities. Seeing no lights, we'll leave everything as it is. Moving on. For new business, at the board meeting, we'll actually, and this isn't on the agenda because can't really adopt the agenda before we swear y'all in, so that'll be done before the at the beginning of the board meeting, and then we'll all convene, and the first new business item will be the election of new officers. At that point, anyone can make nominations, and Ms. Shirley will handle the voting. And new members, have y'all had it? Y'all, I think this is like the first time y'all are seeing your iPads, maybe for some of you. So, Tommy, have they had any training on the e-meetings?
No, they have not. They got login information today. We got the iPads, got them logged in, basic microphone, and that's been it. So
Okay.
we need to do something for sure.
Okay. Sounds good. How do y'all have any thoughts on that for the new board members? What kind of training you think you might need? Or it probably can be a fairly brief training, but that's, how we vote at the meeting, so.
We're usually here early before every meeting, so if you guys prefer before the next meeting, we'll make sure we're here early to answer any questions so that you guys got a firm grasp of what you need to do. If that's okay, if that's agreeable, everybody will be here early. We're usually here, Dave and myself are usually here about a half hour early, so if you have any problem, iPad, anything like that, please, we'll be here.
Sounds good.
Oh, do they have anything that shows I think the screens that actually show the voting would be the only question, would be what that part looks like. Do they have like any demos or any screenshots showing what they expect to look at? Like the two screens is the only difference, because you'd have to kind of have a live meeting for that.
Yeah.
I think we probably, we'll have some of that.
Or set up a dummy meeting.
Yeah, or just say, hey, here, do it. We'll get with Shirley and we'll figure
Okay,
something out.
it would probably be helpful for them.
Yeah, so they see actually what's gonna happen.
Yes.
Right.
Luckily, Tommy is always available if we have problems, and sometimes we do. So we'll elect new officers, and then it's time to elect new trustees for the sick bank. Mr. Pennings, I think you've served on that. I know Joanna was on it before. Do you want to speak to what that involves?
Yeah, the sick bank they call us when some teachers that belong to the sick bank ask for extra days. And then we go to a meeting, and it's usually, I guess because Joanna and I both worked, it was usually at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. But they send you an email and tell you when they want to hold a meeting and ask if you can be there. And you just look at all the medical information and at their request and decide with the ladies that are part of the sick bank if you are going to allow them to take extra days or disallow the extra days. It's important for the teachers. It doesn't take that much time. Our meetings usually last 15, 20 minutes, Amanda. And that's about it. But it is important.
Thanks, Mr. Pennings. And that's 3-year, is that a 3-year term? Okay. And just going back to the officers, I think the officers that'll be elected will be the chair, the vice chair, the pro tem, and the TLN representative, which that's the liaison between the board and the legislature. And I think the other ones are fairly self-explanatory, but if anybody has any questions, feel free to buzz in. But those will be the 4 officers elected and then the sick bank trustees. All right. Seeing no lights. We'll move on to adoption of the license salary schedule.
Right, it's actually per policy 2.300, the board is to adopt a district-wide salary schedule. So we have the proposed 2018-2019, and this has the $214.83 flat increase added to it, and that's just, the board has to adopt that each year.
Well, I have a couple of questions. If it was $214.83, then why is not the 83 reflected on each one instead of some having 15 cents, 71? And going further with that, I would like to see us just round it off. I've never seen, and you haven't ever seen, a salary schedule that has cents in it.
Right, normally we do post just with the rounding up or down. We took the actual salary amounts that were in Skyward, not what was actually posted on the salary schedule, because we do round those up or down. And we did reflect the 83 cents. That's where these came from. And I was given direction to make sure that the cents were posted so people would know exactly what they were making.
But they're
each
not
year.
all decimal point 83 cents.
Right, they won't be. Because their salaries, what we posted, just basically so it would be easier to read, the salary schedule that we usually posted was rounded up, but their actual salaries had cents in them, so they're not going to be 83 cents.
So these are the actual salaries.
Those are the actual salaries.
All right, let me ask you this. Would we have to say we want it rounded up to be posted, or are you saying you post it rounded up?
We normally have posted it rounded.
So when we adopt this, it's not what will be seen particularly.
You can have it this way posted, or you can have it rounded posted.
But we could take board action to say it should be rounded.
You could. Now, what we're going to put in the payroll system would be their actual salary.
And it's always had cents like that, because I never remember ever having.
Their actual salaries do have cents. Just
Okay.
for ease of it looking a lot nicer and cleaner, we've normally rounded those figures so that you didn't have cents when we posted it. And the system has always had cents, and we budgeted it that way as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, any other discussion on this item? Ms. Morency?
I think I'd like to see it reflected just how it is, so there's no confusion whatsoever, that they don't say, just one of them, I'm supposed to be making $47,173, and I'm making $47,172.16. So I would rather see, that's just my feeling, but I'd rather see that it's exactly right and we know exactly what it's reflected the way that it actually is.
And since we took over in December with the payroll, we've had a lot of questions because, for instance, in the past, it's always been posted as $36,474. And people would call and say, why am I not making that? Why am I making $36,473.90? So they have questioned that 10 cents before. So for ease of letting them know, this is exactly what you're making. That was one of the things that went into the decision to post it this way.
I agree with Ms. Morency. I mean, if this is exactly what they're getting paid, then it should be exactly what we're approving. No more, no less. I mean, I want my paycheck to be exact. If the boss took 2 cents out of every paycheck over a period of time, no, thank you.
I don't have a problem. I just have never seen a salary schedule with the cents. That's it. My question is how we derive from it. I never even saw on a pay stub that there was a decimal in cents. Maybe there was, I don't know, but I've seen a lot of salary schedules. I've just never seen it with the cents on it. So if you're going to post it for others as they come in to apply, without that makes more sense to me for people applying for a job, but certainly if that's what they're earning, no problem.
So when it was posted before, it was just posted with it rounded. But was that what was approved by the board? Was,
Normally the finance department has brought this every year, you all. This is the first year we have brought it. I'm assuming they just did it once so it would look better, and they just rounded it. What they're actually paid. What the employees actually paid is not rounded. The employees actually paid the salary with the cents.
what would be the impact on the budget if this, I mean, if it was made to be a even number, no decimals?
Green. The way it was budgeted was exactly what it, with the cents. Because everything was so tight, so it was the exact pot of money divided by everyone. So it came down to having cents. So you'd almost have to round it down if you want a whole number.
Well, in some instances, you know, $47,172.16. I mean, I would round that. I mean, just under. You would round down. So, but you guys haven't looked at what the impact would be on if you did round up or down on these numbers.
When it was in question, we talked about it and the fact that it was budgeted to the cent and everything was like approved at the board and at the county to the cent, that we just left it alone, that it was budgeted to the cent, and that's what it was.
All right. Are there any objections from board members to this being placed under consent? But I believe if it's put under consent, the consensus of this board is that this will be what is published on the website, not any rounding.
Yeah.
Okay. Moving on, strategic plan. I think this is something for the actual board meeting. That's just kind of a placeholder. So unless there's any questions, we'll just move on to the next item. Seeing no lights, we'll move on to instruction. First item is the academic performance data, 4-year trend.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. So you have the Excel file that I sent. So if we could get you to open that up. And hang on one second and take a look at, thank you. It seems like there's only one tab there. There's several tabs available to you, hopefully. Do you have several tabs on yours? Just one tab? Okay, then hang on one second and let me get that. I can forward that to you.
While Dr. Prenninger's getting that,
Pardon me?
are you just emailing that to
I am
us?
going to. Will that work? Or I can put it up on the
I
screen?
think it'd
or-
probably be better if you put it up on the screen and
Okay.
email it to us later.
Okay,
if
yeah,
that's
absolutely,
possible.
I can do that. All right, so I just need to get control of the overhead there.
Can you see the number?
All right, hang on. Just 1 second.
Is that number?
It's 40.
0655.
All right, so this first, I can make that a little bigger, hang on. Make it a little bigger for you. Okay, here in this first tab that I'm showing you is basically a comparison of the various grade bands that we have in the district. 2015 is shown in gray because we had a completely different test in 2015. So we can't compare 2015 to the later years. 2016 is blacked out because we did not have any results for our grades 3 through 8, and we did have high school. So we could start by focusing on our elementary. And so you can see that while we were fairly successful in 2015, in part due to familiarity with the tests that have been around for a little while, as teachers get a better beat on that. Again, 2016, there was no testing in the elementary grades. 2017 brought a completely new test on board. And we also had a problem with the deployment of 10 Ready in 2017, of tests coming back on time. So those tests did not end up counting for the students in the district. And the same for 2018. 2018 had some additional problems in that was our first online deployment of 10 Ready at the high school level. And so that also impacted basically the success, I think, overall of the test. If I scroll down.
Dr. Pruninger,
Sure,
just
absolutely.
out of curiosity, the online component and the impact on our scores, were we the only county in the state that had that happen?
We can address that one at some of the other tabs, but I think you'll
Okay.
see that it affected everybody.
Okay,
We're pretty much in the same boat on that.
okay,
But we'll take a look at that next.
okay.
So this tab here is just focusing on Murray County. And that was our grades 3 through 8. We can, come down here to the high school. So we're seeing our 9 through 12 assessments. Again, this was a completely different test. So when they change over the test, teachers need to learn new standards and kind of get a feel from released items and whatnot, what the tests look like. So I think that started perhaps to happen in general. But in blue here, we had this online deployment problem. And so we'll take a look at that question that you asked about in a minute. But clearly it had, I think, a pretty significant impact for our students. Again, this is a different test. Now this is the 2016 year. We did have high school testing, and so that's why we have results for those and not through the 3 through 8. And keep in mind, I will send you this this Excel file at the end, and you'll have a chance to look at that. In 2017, we had the same tests, and in 2018 we have the online deployment. So it's really a great question, how much did that interfere with our testing? So for that information, and for the comparison, I was asked for a comparison of 4 years. So to go back to 2015 and compare to other surrounding districts, I prepared this initial file. Now, at the time I prepared this for you, we did not have the 2018 results. And what I had to do was find, the state releases data in a number of different files. We have base files, numeric files, now we have assessment files, and the data is dealt with a little bit differently in each one. So in order to give you something that you can compare, I really need to be pulling it from the same file and in the same manner so that we could compare year to year. And there are a number of different ways that these could have been compared. I took the average of the basically the average success rate of proficient and mastered for grades 3 through 8 ELA, math, science, and averaged that along with the individual EOC success rates to get the overall numbers that you see here. And I did that in the same base file that was available for each year, 2015, 2016, and 2017. Again, we have 2015 in gray because it was a distinctly different test. And you could see that for all of these surrounding districts, they all, including ourselves, had a pretty good handle on the test. When we came to a new test in 2016, these are just EOC scores because remember we had that failed deployment of the grades 3 through 8. We have 2017 here. Again, this is from the base file with the comparison that I mentioned. And when you receive this file from me, it will also states pretty clearly what's there, what's left out, how I did the analysis, okay? Just so you know that information, you don't have to remember it. So these are all of our surrounding counties, and I just threw in Davidson and Williamson because those are two that seem to kind of come up. At the time I prepared this, we did not have a file for 2018. Earlier today, I found the newly released assessment file. We did not get a base file, and we didn't get the file broken down in the same grade bands that we had here. So I was able to combine each of these and make those averages because the same level of data was available. What it did give me for on the file that was recently released was 2016-17 and 17-18 that were analyzed by the state in the same way. And instead of providing individual EOC success rates, in this case they gave high school math, high school science, and high school ELA. So I averaged those in to these files instead of what we saw in the previous one where each individual EOC class was averaged. It really didn't make more than maybe 1% or 2% difference. And you'll see that when you get the files. But I didn't want to compare apples to oranges in any way. So these are comparable. Again, it's the amount of on-track and mastered for each of the counties. It's completely comparable. They came from the same file, calculated in the same way. Again, the percent on-track and mastered for grade bands 3 through 8, ELA, math, and science were averaged with the high school, ELA, math, science, and social studies. So you can see that across the surrounding counties, that online deployment problem had an effect on just about everybody's score. Very few have gone up, and most have gone down, 2 to 5%. We had Lewis County that went up. Kudos to them. Most districts saw a decline in the year where we had problems with this online testing deployment.
Thanks for the information, Dr. Pritinger. I'll open the floor up for discussion. I know previous board member had said that we needed to have a laser focus on academics, and so I think it's important for us to look at this information and figure out what we're doing right and maybe figure out what we're not doing so well. But one of the reasons I had asked for the 4-year information was because I remembered when we when I first got on the board, there was discussion about proficiency and being able to read on grade level, do math on grade level. And if you look back at 2014, 2015, and we were looking at, I think, 2013, 2014, maybe, the question was posed, is it okay that 60% of our kids at the time were not on grade level in reading or math? And now with the new test and the new standards, I guess the question would be, is it okay that less than 70% of our kids can read or do math on grade level.
I would say is absolutely not okay. And I don't think there's anyone in our department that would think it was okay. I do think that the numbers here only differ by 1 or 2 percentage points, and you could easily take these 2018 numbers and just pop them into that aisle of to be determined, to
Okay.
be able to have that 4-year comparison.
Okay.
And I'm hoping that the state will continue to release files in the same way so that I can line them up and really make that better determination. But I would agree, and I know that Dr. Woodard would agree, and Dr. Marzak, and all of us in the instruction department, as well as throughout the district, that is not an okay number. And so we have set some aggressive targets, and schools are coming in every day to show us their plans to meet those targets.
I know that it seems like we're not going in the right direction. I mean, is that fair to say?
I would agree. What the problem is, from what we see, we are not going in the right direction. We have students that are coming into high school that have never had a successful testing year. I think that we do really need to improve tremendously and in big strides, not just little tweaks. But it is difficult to know the degree when we continue to have failed testing initiatives. So I'm really hoping that the state is able to at least complete the deployment all the way through to students completing their test before any announcements are made that there's problems or they don't count, because it's difficult for teachers and schools to even know where their students are. I am sure that our students knew more, and the students in the surrounding communities knew more than what these tests showed. But how much more, we can't say.
I don't see any other lights. We'll put this as an FYI. If you can send that file out to us, we'll appreciate it. And if you can also update that information if and when the state releases those files for the 2018 to be determined numbers.
That's actually why we needed this one. They're not releasing base files anymore.
At all.
No,
Okay.
this is the new file system.
Okay.
And they've broken it down slightly different. So we're not going to get that. I had thought that would be the way it would come up, and I saw from the testing file that they, instead of giving us the individual ones, we are now having the grade bands. The numbers are slightly different. Really only a percentage point or 2. And I would be comfortable putting, the numbers for 2018 into that to be determined. Maybe I'll put a little asterisk there to explain that minor difference, but really it's very small. Because you can actually look at 2017, for example, we were at 29.1 in the new file release. If I looked at how the file released 2017 from 29.1, sorry, over here, is 28.02. So really about 1 percentage point. So I do feel, and this is the closest file that we're going to get to the base file, this assessment file.
Okay.
So I would feel comfortable putting it in there, but I just wanted to explain to you all before I did that and make sure you were good with that.
Well, there's a lot of, unfortunately, I think this is a product of the state's testing and the issues when we've got areas that are grayed out, we've got areas that are blacked out because we didn't have a test, we've got areas that they've changed to use a different file. This is rather frustrating. So, we did a letter to the state or to the governor for talking about testing, but I think this shows how this does not give us any information that really makes it very useful for us in a lot of ways.
I would totally agree. Another option here is to take this 2017 and 2018 and just put those two, because that's how we expect the future files to look like.
Gotcha.
So if I took those 2 rows and put them in for those 2 rows, then at least next year we would have 3 consistent rows to look at.
I'd like to see that.
We can, I don't think that it's going to make if that's going to be the process going forward, I think that's probably what we should look at, having that as the baseline.
Okay, then I'll go ahead and send that file to you with that in there.
Okay, thank you.
And a little tiny note.
All right, and and I appreciate the work that you've done in trying to decipher this information. My complaints are not in any way directed at you or at our staff, but more so directed at the state. And quite frankly, when students are getting tweets that say that this isn't going to count or whatever, I mean, this is a joke. It's a joke for teachers to have their evaluations tied to something that is a joke.
I couldn't agree more. I really couldn't.
Mr. Atkinson.
We pretty much know this is a state-driven issue. Have y'all got any word yet on how the problem's going to be fixed for next year? Or for this year?
Dr. Woodard?
They've been hosting a series of webinars about some of the corrections that will be made with testing for next year, but we don't have any definitive answers. It's just they're also hosting several of those TN Ready listening sessions across the state. Dr. Marzak wants to chime in.
Tommy, can you hear me now? Yeah. Okay, so that's obviously this is sort of the contention day for the first day of the Tennessee Organization of School Superintendents and the Tennessee Department of Ed conference today. It's almost a little bit from the department of, okay, we know it happened, let's kind of move on. And superintendents are not accepting that as acceptable, basically from the Tennessee Department of Education. There has been, I guess I'll put it after, some celebration over the last 4 or 5 months in the Department of Ed of the drop in scores, to say that the scores are now closely related to how Tennessee students are performing on the NAEP, the National Educational Assessment Program that's put out from Washington, D.C. You can't prepare for it, and so kids either do well or they don't. And so the department is kind of celebrating the scores dropping from 14, 15, and from 16, 17 down to be closer to what NAEP actually is. And of course, superintendents, of course, also don't take that as acceptable as, oh, we celebrate our kids' scores dropping. That's unacceptable. Kids should be moving forward, not moving backwards and demonstrating less proficiency. It almost seems, Governor Haslam spoke to us last night. It did admit that there were problems. It did admit that they have to get it right, but they didn't really tell us what they're going to be doing to get it right. If we were still on the block schedule, kids would be tested the first week in December online. But because we're period scheduled now, kids are not tested till April. We had 3 of our educators last week go to the listening session in Franklin Special School District. I had a chance to talk with all of them on Friday, and I asked them one question. Tell me yes or no, based on what you heard and based on what you were able to speak about and talk about. Do you think testing is going to go off well without any problems this year? And all 3 without hesitation said no. So I'm really interested to see the communication coming from the department over the next couple months to really demonstrate what they're going to be doing to get testing right. Because right now, educators and principals and superintendents, as of the end of the day today, are not confident that the state has got it figured out yet.
Is there any talk about it lining up with ACT testing?
There has been some discussion about that, but the department wants to stick with TN Ready. They're firm and adamant that that's a better measure of students' performance than the ACT, but we're not letting up on that. I've had a conversation with Dan Lawson, and if you'll remember, about 2 years ago, Murray County and Tullahoma City partnered on a bill that would make the ACT the standard assessment in the state of Tennessee. And before Dr. Lawson resigns in December, he would like to know if we're interested in partnering on that legislation again, because his legislator is interested in taking it up the hill. I had a conversation with Scott Sapicki on Friday, who you know is running for office for Sheila Butt. He is also interested in supporting the ACT, as well as Michael Curcio. So our legislators in Murray County are in support of transitioning from the EOC TN Ready to the ACT.
Well, we just had how many years of 10 ready failures? 3 years in a row?
Yes, sir.
I mean, that ought to tell somebody something at state level that this is not working. Let's get on board with something that is working.
We've seen 19 legislators sign a petition stating that they have no confidence in TN Ready in the Department of Education. And I think as we get closer to January and February, I think that support is going to continue to build. And what we've heard today from people from the Tennessee Department of Education is in their sessions that we've gone to is this continued support. We can't turn around. We can't go backwards. We got to push forward with TN Ready. They're screaming the rally cry from the Tennessee Department of Ed, and superintendents are just rolling their eyes because we don't think it's going to be right again this year. For superintendents, they still have a couple more TN Ready listening sessions coming up, but from superintendents who have had educators attend those sessions, they didn't walk out with an overwhelming sense of confidence from the superintendents that I've been talking to today.
Do we know what the cost is for ACT Aspire testing?
From what we talked about about 2 years ago is the money that the Tennessee Department of Education budgets to do TN Ready or TCAP at that time. It would be a seamless transition over to the ACT.
My question is really not for like the entire state, because obviously we have our own budget issues, but just from our standpoint, what would be the cost if we wanted to look at this so that we have reliable data that our teachers and administrators can rely on if we wanted to take that on ourselves, potentially?
Offhand, Chair Parker, I'm sorry, I don't have that information, but I can find that out.
Please do.
Yes,
Mr.
ma'am.
Pennings?
I'll make a note of that.
Well, regardless of what the cost is, if we can get accurate information on what our students know or don't know, it'd be awful valuable to us. And as far as TN Ready and the state wanting to keep going with TN Ready, it's not the first time they kept pushing something that has never worked or will never work.
It has been a big source of contention here today, and I don't think that's going to let up over the next 2 days, to be honest with you. Yes, sir.
Anything else from board members on this data? All right, we'll move on to Read to Be Ready math discussion.
Good evening. In your packet, you have a quote from Tennessee Book that has the Read to Be Ready unit starters from the state, the text in there. You will see that it's divided into two sections. One is for the earth science units and one is for the life science units. The grand total comes to $100,457.05. I will qualify this that there are a couple of text here that she was having trouble finding. Some of them are quite old. Some of them are available online. So when you look at this list, if it says core knowledge or ReadWorks, those are available online at no cost to us. So we don't have to worry about an additional fee for those. But some of the books that are older, we are going to have to try to continue to find those, and we'll probably reach out to Barnes & Noble and other book vendors to see what we can get on those. Until I got this back from Tennessee Book, I didn't know what they could and could not source on that. Questions on that one?
It'd be nice if the state knew what could be sourced and what couldn't be sourced before they start making that as part of their framework.
It would also have been nice if they'd have given us the ISBN numbers, and they didn't give us those either, so that kind of slowed the process down as well. So again, I commend the young lady at Tennessee Book for getting as much as she did, but we will continue to work on that. And she is still looking for those additional resources to get that information to me as quick as she can.
Well, the good news is that we also have a governor's election, so maybe we'll also have a new education commissioner. They can get this stuff together.
And just to clarify for you, if you look at those, some of those have a lot more copies of each text than others, and that would be the shared reads that we would buy a set or 2 sets for each school so that they would have those that they could use within their instruction. If it's like 54 or 48, that would be the teachers, they would just need the 1 copy of that book in order to have it. But the others, they would pass around in the grade levels if, for the shared reads. And then the other quote that you have there is the K-4 math materials. This is from Curriculum and Associates. This is the adopted text that we have right now from the state. Well, that Murray County adopted from the state. The cost for a 1-year purchase of the math materials would be $96,755.44. You can see there, if we go ahead and get the full 4-year subscription, which is the remainder of the adoption on this curriculum, the price is $257,041.95. So obviously, it's much more cost-effective if we can buy the whole 4 years. I know, however, our budget is very tight at this point in time on that, but we wanted you to see both options. And up at the top, she gave you the breakdown of the difference in the cost if we go with just 1 year or with 4 year.
When's the math adoption come back up?
Dr. Woodard thinks it's 2 years. I think it's 3 years, but I'd have to.
2020 or 2020?
Yeah, I think 2020 is reading, and I think 2021 is math. So we've got, if you've got 4 years left on this adoption, that's when the new textbook adoption would be coming up.
Okay. So do we think that this will still fall within their standards? And I mean, I guess don't really know, but
It's hard to say for the next 4 years. Yes, it will
was
stay.
it on there the previous 4 years? Let's go back
Well,
that far.
when the adoption changed, which there's a 6-year cycle on the adoption. So when the adoption changed, that should have been when the standards changed. So as the new adoption cycle is coming up, they're looking at reviewing and revising standards so that each time we get the new textbooks, they should be aligned to the new standards.
And are we purchasing textbooks whenever those new adoptions come out?
We have not been, because it hasn't been in the budget to do that. So as we talked about, this this is the first time we've been involved in the actual budgeting process to be able to say this is what we need for textbooks. So moving forward, that's certainly something that we would be including, I would assume, in our budgets. But this is the first year we've actually had that opportunity to be involved in making those kind of decisions.
I hope going forward that we might can get on that schedule.
Yeah, it's definitely something that is needed, but to be fair to you, it runs $700,000 to $1 million a year, depending upon what's being adopted. So just so y'all are aware, when that comes in, if we're looking at purchasing for every grade level, all new text, it does get quite costly.
Can y'all try to include that, though, when each of the adoptions come in, at least to give us that information?
Absolutely.
Because if we don't have that information and we don't know what our budget looks
Yes,
like,
ma'am.
then
And this
kind
year,
of shooting in the dark.
it's CTE, social studies? It's either social studies or science. I'd have to look back, but those,
Okay.
it's science. Okay, so social studies and science, yes, because we just did new science standards. So the new textbook should be coming out aligned to the new science standards. So yes, ma'am, in February, well, we'll give you an estimate because we don't actually do that until April.
Okay.
So, but we can definitely include an estimate for that.
Thank you. Mr. Atkinson?
Where is the money coming from? We do have it budgeted?
This is in the budget for
It's in
this
the
year.
budget.
It is in the budget, that's what I was asking.
Yes, sir.
Make sure.
I don't know the exact amount, but I do know it was budgeted in there for this year.
Okay.
So with the budget this year, will it cover then the 4 years of the math adoption if we went that far? It would only cover 1 year. And will this include any PD for teachers when they get these materials?
Ms. Cohn has been trying to contact the sales rep all week to find out for sure what PD is involved in that. But yes, it typically does, I stress typically does include PD. And Mandy, I'm going to defer to you. Can you let us know what all is included that you know of in that price?
If you look right up here at the top of your sheet, it will tell you that it includes a student text, a practice workbook, and an online diagnostic. And that online diagnostic is supposed to help with getting down to the skill of what the kid needs to know, which is a vital piece that we need. And I have samples of it. If I brought samples, if y'all want to look at it. But that's the three that it would be included with that price. And what I have read is that the PD is a part of this, but I wanted specific confirmation from them as to what they say. And we're just having a hard time getting in touch with them. So I think there's a job changeover.
Gotcha.
We'll continue to work on that.
Yeah.
Is the online diagnostic, is that something that y'all can use for RTI?
That's what I'm hoping. That's what I'm reading, that it helps within the class, the general ed classroom, but also can be used for that piece along with the Ames Web to really drill down and see what we're missing in the gaps of our students.
Okay.
And then to plan around that.
Mr. Atkins?
As far as the funding piece of this, I guess you're gonna bring this for the full committee this month. I guess you need to figure out what the pot's coming out of, and the 4-year plan, if it's divided up into yearly payments where we can pay it out every year like that, I don't mind doing a 4-year, but as long as they accept
Sometimes-
payments every year.
Sometimes they'll let us do that, sometimes they won't. It depends, I think, on who the publisher is and how Tennessee Book is
But,
working, but we
yeah.
can certainly check on that as well.
If we don't have the
Yes.
funding for it, I mean, we'll just have to go
Right.
through the 1-year plan, but if we can divide it out over the 4 years in yearly payments, then I don't mind doing the 4-year plan.
We can certainly check on that. And also, we're working on finalizing the social studies and science unit for 4th grade, as well as the additional unit starters that our teachers worked on this summer. And we would like to come back with the cost of books for those units as well. However, we want to wait until we get that finalized so that we're not purchasing books that we aren't actually going to use. Sometimes we see that this book doesn't exactly work right. So we are working on finalizing those, and we'll hope to get that information to you soon.
Mr. Bennings, did you? Okay. Are you wanting to have those before the September board meeting, or?
No, ma'am, we'll probably
Okay.
come back to you in hopefully October with that cost.
Okay.
Just to be clear, this is budgeted, it's in the budget, so, you know, all of this will fit into that. I think it was 300 and something thousand that we budgeted for this. So if we did the 4, we'd have to find that somewhere.
That's where I
else.
was
Right.
getting at. If we've got the budget now for the yearly books, if they'll do the 4-year plan, scattered out payments of over 4 years, we can do that. But if we try to pay all 4 years up front, we're probably gonna be short funding, so.
We can certainly request that information and see if that's available to us.
Mr. Bennings?
Yeah, if we could get them to agree to the 4 years, and we can budget it every year for the next 3 years. If we know the cost, we can put it in the budget. And once we put it in the budget, we just have to make sure that we keep it in the budget.
And that would just be in addition to whatever other textbooks we would be looking at purchasing for that year, whatever was up for adoption that year.
And we've talked in the past about K2 materials. When's the last time that we actually purchased K2 materials?
It was before I took this position, so I'm really not sure.
So I just want
Okay,
people
I'm
to.
hearing 9 years behind me.
I just want people to have that as a little bit of perspective when we're talking about whether or not we should do 1 year or 4 years. I'm a little, I'll be honest, I'm a little hesitant to just do 1 year because I don't want these teachers to be getting this material again next year in October or November, because then they're not even really getting the full year's benefit of those materials. So we've got to start being proactive about this, and 9 years is embarrassing for this county, and I think the test scores reflect it. Mr. Pennings.
It's a constant fight for the textbooks. I mean, I don't know how many years that it hasn't been in the budget, and then we go and we do a budget amendment for the county commission, 300,000, 200,000, take it out of fund balance or whatever. But we, from the beginning, should have been budgeting for books and making sure it stayed in the budget instead of saying, well, let's take them out. And Ms. Parker's absolutely right. I remember kids not getting their books until Christmas time. You know, that we're closer to closing schools for the year than we are for starting schools for the year when they don't get them till Christmas time. So I'm in favor of trying the 4 years and seeing if we can do it. That way we know the cost, at least for these books, and we can budget it. Work your magic.
Thank you, Mr. Penny. Would it please the board if we could bring to you the cost if the company will work with us for the 4-year price? But if they don't, can we just move forward with the 1 year so that we're not delaying? We think that we can get the books back within 4 to 5 weeks, and we really want to get something in teachers' hands, and that was the purpose of us trying to get this on here. And I want to thank Chair Parker for helping us to speed this up. Now, in terms of what we have in the budget right now for textbooks, we have $316,457. And again, the bulk of that cost was for K4. That's for K4 math and for the Read to Be Ready. So we did due diligence on that.
Include in that budget, purchasing the unit starters that we were writing as well. So that money coming down the road is included in the budget.
I just don't want us to get into a budget crunch on this. I want to be able to, if they won't let us do the 4-year plan, we'll pay for the 1 year. If you got it budgeted, we'll pay for the 1 year, the way I see it. And then if we got a few cents left over, we can kind of save that and put towards what we need as far as books later on.
Well, and I know a lot of times we like to put stuff under consent, but for this, so that we can get that information and be able to have a little bit more information at the board meeting, I'd prefer that we leave it under here so that we can either decide whether or not we can do 1 year or 4 years, based upon whatever you're able to find out from the book publishers.
And as we get those additional titles, do you want us to update that as well on here? So she's working on that, and we'll get that to you just as quickly as we can, so you have a good idea of where that's at as well.
I mean, I think if this attachment changes before the board meeting, that's fine, but once the agenda's posted, that's probably needs to be our cutoff.
Yes, ma'am.
Unless other board members feel differently, but I think that's.
Okay, I'll work with her to try to see what we can get done. That gives us about a week, I think, before the final, so I'll work with her. She's been working on that since Friday.
Awesome.
So hopefully she's finding some of those titles.
And can you also check on the PD aspect?
Absolutely, we'll still keep working on that as well. And typically, a certain amount of PD is included based on what your purchase is. So it just varies. Since it's been 2 years since math books were adopted, that could be a little different, but we'll certainly follow up on that.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions, board members? All right. Do you have any update on the Read to Be Ready? Because I know that we're using Read to Be Ready now, aren't we? Essentially.
We are using the strategies in Read to Be Ready. There's still training that needs to be going on, and Dr. Stacy Elkins is our new K-12 ELA consultant. She took Tanya Potts' place when Miss Potts went to McDowell as the assistant principal. So Stacy's having to get caught up and come up to speed on it, but she's worked diligently for the last 2 weeks. And Stacy, do you want to give any kind of update with the training on that?
No pressure.
Yeah. We talked about this.
Brief.
Yeah. At this point, what we have in place with each of the individual schools is we have an organizational structure in place because each school needs different things. And so we're meeting with each school has a contact person that I am working with to develop PD for that school. And then we have deliverables in place so that they have something as far as like that they're putting in place to prepare them for when we get these books. And we officially start using the framework. However, we are implementing aspects of the framework so that the teachers can get comfortable with it, because some of it is a paradigm shift for them. But for the most part, these are strategies they have been using in their classroom. It's just upping the level of expectation that we need to have for our students so that they can be successful in that data that we're seeing.
Thank you for that update. Thank you, Ms. Elkins. And thank you for that information, Ms. Miller. Seeing no lights, we can move on to the 20-day enrollment count. Are there any comments from our questions?
I have a question. Where are all the students that are supposed to be breaking down the doors to come? Not a big increase here. Where are they? Have you gone looking for them?
Well, we're doing our best. As you can see with the three attachments, we are increasing. Maybe not the rate that some may have thought, but we are increasing. When this report, this was created on 8/29, our membership has already gone up today. From the 12,937, we're at 12,965 in just a few days. So we still are increasing, but maybe not at the rate that some may have thought. I mean, I don't know what that thought was at the time.
Mr. Howell.
So I'm just looking at the comparison, and you've compared it from May to August. I looked at it a little differently. I looked at it from year to year, from August to 17 to August 18. I kind of made a little printout here. And it looks like enrollment's down, just from my numbers that I've got here, from the 20 days of August 2017 to the 20 days of August 2018. And, I mean, there's some increases, maybe a little bit at Highland Park from my numbers, but there's a lot of negative.
You mean from some school, at some schools?
Correct.
Yeah. But district-wide, we're up.
District-wide, yeah, by 1%, is what I'm showing from numbers 2017, 2018. So mirroring what Ms. Betty was saying, no, we're not seeing a huge increase of people coming in right now.
Correct.
So.
Mr. Lang, have you looked at these numbers in comparison to the information that we got from Dr. Register's report when they were tracking what we?
I can get that for you. I do not have a comparison, but I can add it if you need that.
I just think that Dr. Register's report is what we relied upon in order to, decide that we wanted to add about, over 1,000 seats in our county at one school, so almost 2,000 seats. So I think if our increase is only 100, 200, I think we need to know how off those numbers were as we start looking at maybe making some other decisions.
When the projections was made for this coming school year, the projections that I went through and created, I did look at those numbers, and the numbers I came up with were a little less than what was projected at this time for the beginning of this school year. And right now, the projection that we came up with from our office are pretty close. So there is a variance from what was projected from that particular study. But I have not looked at each school to see how far off it was. Maybe glanced at it, but not created a report for it.
Okay.
Would you like to see that?
I think that would be helpful for us.
Sure.
I don't want to add to your workload.
No,
but
no.
I do think
Another column.
I do think that as we're, rezoning was something that we've got to address, obviously, as we look at opening up new schools. And so I think that, looking at maybe what those projections were, what they actually come out to be in some of our schools would be very useful.
Absolutely.
Just as a data point.
Okay, we'll do that.
Thank you. Ms.
You're welcome.
Kinzer.
I know that, Dr. Woodard, you gave us, when you were in that position, you knew how many were being homeschooled. Do we have that figured? How many, is that increasing? Is that maybe wise?
Well, that's kind of a moving target, and let me explain why. We know how many we've approved or have approved for homeschooling, but when they go under an umbrella school, it's up to that school to send us the data, how many students that reside in our county that go to that school. For example, some of the church organizations that have homeschools, very seldom do we get any of that information. So, yes, we can give you a number of how many that we are aware of, but that's only a tip of the iceberg of kids that are being homeschooled that may have never even started in our county or moved into an umbrella situation that have not been accounted for. Very difficult, because they should report to us, but as far as the state is concerned, as far as a penalty or leverage on them to give us that information, that's not available.
Well, I just think maybe it's not important to know But I do think that I'm just a little shocked that we do not have the growth we anticipated. Maybe it's coming. We certainly have the growth in the northern part of the county without a doubt, but it's not significant at this point.
The homeschool numbers that we are aware of, and I'll pull my laptop out and see if I can pull that up in a few minutes, but they have not grown significantly over the last few years. But we don't know about where they are under some of these umbrellas, some of these church schools, et cetera.
Okay.
Online, those homeschools that are online, they're called umbrella online schools, and they have not shared that with us.
Okay, I'm just confused where we're not seeing growth here. I mean, I would agree, and I think when we came on this board, when I came on 4 years ago, the trends were already in place where we had some schools that had been decreasing for almost a decade now or more. But you've got schools that are, if you go look at the enrollment from August 30th of 2017 to August 29th of 2018, what is that, page 3 on the chart, which shows a 124 student increase. I mean, we've got, if you could, there's a couple of schools, you could pick 1 or 2 schools that make up more than that increase by themselves, but you're seeing a net loss in several other schools. I think so. It's a little deceiving when you say there's no growth if you look at just the net change in the total number of students. I mean, we really do have some schools that are really growing, but we've got others that are really declining and have been consistently for a long time. And I think it kind of throws the number off when we're looking at these. It just makes it difficult. So I tend to ignore I know you guys have to look at the total population change, but for me, when I'm looking at the schools, that sticks out more to me than what just the net change is. And to be fair, I think over the last 7 or 8 years, we really haven't seen a significant change in the total number of students. It's been very small for quite a long time.
You're right, Mr. Moore. We haven't seen a significant increase in students. And some of the schools that are going down, I mean, they're in the districts like Highland Park, where the kids that made up that school, they're gone. They're graduated and they've moved on. And there's no new families moving in there. The people that own the property there still live there, and they no longer have children. So the demographics are definitely changing from school to school. But I'm like you, I don't see the overall growth that we expected so far. According to the realtors, it's coming, but we'll see.
Yeah, so you talk about Highland Park, it's got a decrease, but eventually, huh? Oh, they up? Highland Park increase? I'm sorry. Well, the ones that decrease, you will see some population growth, not in the next few years, but eventually you will see it grow again, because you're gonna have families pass away and houses being sold and children coming in. So you will have that increase again in those schools. It just may not be the next 4 or 5 years, but you will have that number come back.
Sorry, and I'll say this again because I say it I think every time. I personally, I would like to see trends longer than a 2-year trend on this. So when we put these together, and going back to what we talked about, and I've been talking about it for a while, Dr. Register's report is it 3.5 years old now at this point? The data originally, I'm sorry, 2.5 years old. So when did we get the report? Which he pulled it from the previous year. Okay. So, but again, the point is, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, that report, I mean, although we base decisions on it, we have got to start getting accurate and current information on our own. We can't just go back to his report. We've got to start keeping this stuff going up year to year to year to year so that we can make the most accurate decisions based on what information we have now. Going back to the Dr. Register report, even though it obviously impacted us at the time, it's just old data at this point. I mean, right, wrong, or however it is, we have to be building new data and making the new decisions on it.
Mr. Moore, I agree with you. My point in asking about Dr. Register's data is more so the fact that I think that staff was using that for how they did their projections. And if those projections that he did were originally false, then I don't see how our projections aren't going to be false if that's what staff uses. And that's really the only, I mean, that's really part of what I'm trying to get across.
Well, staff does not use Dr. Register's projection.
Okay.
Staff makes the projection
Mm-hmm.
and just for fun compared with Dr. Register's projection.
Okay.
But it was not used to make that projection.
How many years do you feel like would be beneficial to see? You mentioned you would like to see longer than a 2 or 3 year trend. Obviously, this data should be available to where we can get that information at schools.
I wouldn't see why this isn't a running data set that is kept year to year with notations for any. Okay, when I first came on the board, I built one myself because I'm an Excel nerd, and I had 7 years worth of data in that that I threw together with notations based on any year we did rezonings, which obviously would impact, or any other major changes, and you could notate those years. I don't see why. And again, and I've said all along, we are going to have to be maintaining this body of data year after year after year, so that we're not having to go and do another report like we did with Dr. Register. We shouldn't have to hire that out from this point forward. We should have the tools, and that was part of the reason I think we did that, was start creating this data. And again, I would like to see this. I would like to see us starting with this information here. We've got 2 years here. Go back and start building it into a data set of as far back as we can go, and maintaining that moving forward. It just only, I want to see trend lines. A 2 year, year to year does not tell me anything. That's just me. I want to see some kind of trend. It was very easy to see, again, with the reports that I had built, it was very easy to see that the major dips when we rezoned, when we had a change in some kind of a new school was brought online. It was very easy to see, and it was understandable. 2 years just doesn't, although it's good information to have, it just, I want to start seeing just as much as we can throw in there. That's what I would be doing if I were building them.
Oh, Mr. Beaver.
Thank you, ma'am. When you made mention about that y'all made the projections, where did y'all get the information from to make the projection?
Well, the projections came from, we looked at the fifth attendance period. We looked at how the school year school year began. We looked at the end of the previous school year, and we looked at those 3 pieces of data and then compared that to currently what they had. And then we say, okay, this is the growth we've had. We project that on out. So we use that those 3 pieces of data to make that projection.
Okay, so you didn't use any outside source that, I guess, all these realtors and planners, county planners and everything that they use?
No, sir. I chose not to use hypotheticals. I chose to use the real numbers and what the real numbers actually said to me.
Okay, all right. I just want to find.
Sure thing.
Thank you.
No problem.
It seems to me that the relevant thing that we need to look at is capacity. Obviously, Spring Hill Middle is absolutely at capacity. So is Spring Hill High School, or don't you think? So looking at some of these numbers that there is not a lot of increase or decrease, they still have capacity. So that's another consideration here is we've got the schools, they've got capacity, yet we're maintaining this with no growth in some schools and a loss in another. So to me, I think that looking at it and seeing where we are, maybe that's, again, we looked at in the task force, and we haven't gone back to that, but I do think it's really relevant. What's relevant here is what is the situation, what schools are we in a dire situation, and we'll have to address that in zoning, I think.
And one thing, a piece of data that we look at, and it's not on your report, but is married to this report, the out-of-zone students. For example, Highland Park, we said they went up some. They have 43 kids out of zone right now. So when we start looking at out of zone as well, for example, Riverside has 17, Whitthorne has 67. So when we start looking at capacity, we also have to start looking at, okay, do we limit out of zones, et cetera? Because if some of these students went to their zone school, and I do have spreadsheets exactly where each kid comes from when they're out of zone. So if they stayed in their zone, that could increase the number in that particular school. But right now we have an open zone.
Which you provided to the task force and all of those figures at that time. So
right. And I've got the updated ones if you want to see them.
So yes. I think that once we convene that again, then the whole board will be able to see those figures.
Sure thing.
can you also include information about teachers? Because I know sometimes the out of zone is related to teachers that teach at that particular school and
Sure.
then bring their child there.
We've got those listed as well,
Okay. Okay.
especially ones that are out of county.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I do think and I think I had someone ask me the other day if I ever thought that that would change where the board might say, you can teach here, but your kid can't go here because we don't have room for it. And I know we've talked about that in the past and seen that as somewhat of a perk of being able to, of teaching in our system, that you could go out of zone to, your child could go where you teach. But if we're having issues with that, I think we need to just be aware of that so we can be proactive and make sure that we're communicating and planning appropriately.
Now, just want to make sure that I will update things as needed. Starting where we are now, you want to see a trend model going backwards as far as we can go. I've got that noted. Was there anything else that we needed to add that you would like to see?
I guess I'll be looking for a 5-year projected out window.
Got it. And we wanted to compare what the previous data came from Dr. Register's situation, and yes, so we'll do that as well.
Can you stick capacity beside each
And
school?
capacity. Got it. We'll do it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lang.
You're welcome.
All right. That leads right on into staffing allocations.
That's a perfect segue. So, board members, I want to pose a question to you tonight. How can we provide equity in terms of staffing our schools while also maintaining the quality of the programs that we provide? That's the question I want to pose to you tonight. I want that question to be on your minds. Think about this. If we, as we build new schools, how many teachers do we put into those new schools? What's the formula? How do we go about doing that? We could use the BEP, that's the natural guide, but if we use the BEP, then we've created some inequity because we know that we have some schools right now that are staffing above the BEP. So we will be automatically underfunding and understaffing some of those new schools. So my thought with this process was I presented for you a proposal regarding some sample staffing ratios. At the last work session, you asked me to come back and bring you this, and I told you I'd bring you 3 distinct proposals. So if you turn to look at the 3rd page in this document, the page that says sample staffing ratios 512. As you all know, we already have a staffing ratio provided by the state that we utilize in our elementary schools. So this is not an issue. We staff K through 3 at 20-1, and then we staff 4th grade at 25-1, but we do not have a staffing formula per se that we have utilized in our county, in our schools in grades 5 through 12. What that does is over time that when schools, when their enrollment grows and enrollment increases, they will call in and say, hey, help, we need additional positions, and we provide those. But Murray County giveth, but sometimes Murray County does not taketh away. So we have to have a way to also look at reducing staff when numbers go back as well. So we have been diligent in providing staff where needed when schools increase their enrollment, but not as diligent with regards to looking at how we can remove that. So the system that I want to put in place will provide that naturally every year. It will be recurring year after year. Here's what has to happen. We need to establish a definitive teacher-pupil ratio for our county. We have to find a number that's comfortable for all the schools because we have unique schools and we have different sizes in our county. So we have to find the sweet spot. What works well for our large high schools, what's going to work well for our unit schools, and what's going to work well for our smaller schools. And so option 1 says one size fits all. One model that we could utilize to do this is we have one staffing formula for the entire district. And here's how it would work. You would take the school's projected enrollment and divide it by whatever you set the teacher-pupil ratio at, and then that becomes the number that the school will build their master schedule on. That's their number of teachers, and that's what they have to build on. And the only way a school will get more teachers is if their enrollment will go up, then there will be awarded positions, and if they don't meet that projection, then positions will be taken away, and then those positions will be shifted in other parts of the county where the teachers will be needed. So here's the pro of that. The pro is that it creates a streamlined approach for distributing the staffing across the school system. So it streamlines it, and It streamlines that process and makes it pretty smooth. Here's the con to that. Due to the size of our district, a single staffing formula could be detrimental to our smaller schools, okay? That's one thing that could hurt our small schools. Considerations would be poverty, if you think about what poverty looks like in some of our schools. We have rising ELL populations. Our ELL population is somewhere near about 7% in the county. So we're seeing a large increase in EL students. And we also have to think about our SPED population. Our SPED population right now in the county is about 20%. That means every fifth child is in special education. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, one is in SPED. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, a student in SPED. And so those numbers are up as well. So the one-size-fits-all approach does not necessarily take all those needs into consideration. If you look at the box on the end, I gave you an example of Ozark High School. Let's say Ozark High School is projected to be at 326, and let's say the staffing ratio is at 19.5. Let's just say the district set it there. Okay, their teacher allocation would be 17. But let's say maybe currently they have 26. That means that Ozark loses 9 positions. Those 9 positions would go back to the district. And then, of course, our HR person, who would be Amanda, of course, would then have those positions on her list to then reassign wherever there are needs in the county. So that's just an example of what one size fits all would look like. And that's a reduction example, okay? Is it 4? Yes, ma'am. Now let's look at option number 2. In option number 2, we look at small, medium, and large school formulas. Here we have ranges, enrollment ranges, 150 to 350 at 13 to 1, 351 to 550, staffed at 15 to 1, a school that's between the range of 551 to 800 at 16 to 1, a school that has a range of 801 to 1099, 17 to 1, a school that has a range of 1100 to 1299, such as a Spring Hill High School, will be staffed at 18 to 1. A school like Columbia Central that is staffed that has enrollment of 1300 to 1499 will be at 19 to 1. And then, of course, if we ever had a high school that was big enough, we could look at 1500 to about 1799, and we'd staff that school at about 20 to 1. Okay? What's the pro for this? One of the pros will be that it provides a formula that creates a sense of fairness for small and large schools because now everyone has a range. The con of this model, one of the drawbacks is that if a school moves up to a different category, then you would get about the same number of teaching positions that you would have if you were, let's say if a school is at 800, okay, such as maybe an EA Cox is at 16 to 1. If EA Cox jumps up to 813 students, that puts them in a new category, then they get about the same number of positions, and that would seem unfair. In situations like that, we could work with them to maybe award additional positions as needed, but that's the only drawback that I can see. When you look at special considerations, with our unit schools, for the unit schools, we must consider what it looks like in K through 4 for them and then apply the formula in grades 5 through 12. So the unit schools, it's a whole different ball game with them, but it would also create fairness amongst our unit schools as well. So here's an example of Lake Tahoe Prep. I just made up some of these names. Grades 5 through 8, let's say the enrollment is 493, but they're projected at 522, okay? Their projected enrollment puts them at 15 to 1, and so when you divide 15 divided by 522, you get 34.8 or 35 teaching positions. So it means that Lake Tahoe Prep is going to build their master schedule with 35 teaching positions. That gives the principal the autonomy to decide what programs they want to cut or keep, and again, they start building. If that school, let's say Lake Tahoe Prep, is under at the start of the year, they don't meet their projection, then the number that they were under will be subtracted to them and given back to the district, and then of course the district will move those teaching positions around to support the needs of the district. Now here's why this is a win for our district. This will be a win for us because every year we wait till the 20-day count, and that has been a problem for us, waiting to the 20-day count before we award positions. By doing that, we're missing out on some of those high-quality top candidates that are out there, okay? So if we award schools based on their projections in the spring and let them go ahead and hire up front, then we'll have a chance to hire top quality candidates for this county. And that's what we want. We want those top quality candidates, the best that we can find. And so we can get those candidates if we start this process in the spring and we hire for those positions in the spring. We would also be actually making decisions based on the enrollment projections. Currently, we get the enrollment projections and we don't make any decisions based on those projections. It just informs schools about how many people are coming. And then we wait to see if we're right or wrong. So finally, we'll be making decisions based upon those enrollment projections that really will have real implications for our schools, and I think it really will help the schools. So this is another scenario. So you're probably thinking, here's a scenario. What if Tahoe Prep gains 50 more students during the year? So again, positions will be awarded based upon the BEP formula, and then at the end of the year, these positions will remain if projections remain constant. If they are lower, then they get taken away. And then here's another scenario. What if enrollment places a school in a new category? And here's where schools will have to closely monitor their outer zones, right? So now this becomes an incentive for principals to monitor how many people they're letting in their doors, because if you add more students to your school, it could place you into a higher category, and that category would not necessarily incentivize you, okay? You would get about the same number of teachers if you jumped into a new category. So now they have to monitor how many people they're letting in the doors. With the current system that we have, if principals allow more out-of-zone students, it's going to take their enrollment up, and then it's going to cost for more teachers, and they get paid more because we pay based upon the teacher. So I have every incentive to let in more kids out of zone, so the number of teachers goes up and I get paid more money. My proposal will be that we swap that. Instead of paying by the teacher, we pay based upon enrollment. For the most part, I think we've seen with our trends that our enrollment stays about the same here in the county for the most part. I've not seen any school jump enrollment by 100 or 200 students in a single year. And so I think that would be a more efficient way to decide how we pay teachers. But that would just be flipping that model and paying by the number of students that you have. That way, if we happen to have what we call a RIF, a reduction in force, principals are not penalized by something that they cannot control. Principals cannot control whether or not we choose to make those deep cuts, but we don't want them penalized. Obviously, this year we faced a situation with the budget crisis where we may have had to potentially lay off teachers. And if we had to do that, that would impact the pay for principals. And obviously that would seem, of course, unfair to them. So student enrollment is it's a pretty stable measure. I think it's a measure that we ought to use. Several counties around us use the student enrollment count, and they pay their principals by the number of students that they have. So there are some counties that do it the way we do and some that don't, but many of the counties are paying by the number of students that they have. Option number 3, I'll go over this one and I'll let you ask me any questions that you have. I hope I'm not going too fast for you here. Option 3 is a single weighted formula. This will be a sliding scale. And I just used an example. And in this example, we're using a scale of 16.5 to 1 to 18 to 1. So in the sliding scale, we're looking at based on poverty, okay? If a school has a poverty rate that's 75% and above, then of course they will be placed at 16.5. If they have a poverty rate that's 61% to 74%, they will be at 17 to 1. If they are below, if they're between, if their poverty is below 60%, somewhere between 46 and 60, 17.5, and if it's below 45% poverty, it will be about 18 to 1. So this would also create a sense of fairness for those schools that are high poverty schools. Currently in our district, I think our poverty rate right now is somewhere around 56%. And so this creates poverty. I've indicated for you to the right, you can see what the poverty levels are based on the most recent free and reduced meals information that we have in our county. So you can see where our highest poverty schools are. We have several high need schools. What this would do is for those high need schools, give them a lower teacher pupil ratio, which would give them the adequate amount of staff that they need and maybe just a little bit more so the class sizes will be comfortable for the purpose of increasing student achievement. So those are the 3 proposals that I have for you. Would love to have your input, your feedback. I have mentioned this to principals. We had a very lengthy debate on September the 4th around some of this. Many principals said they favored option 2 or 3. And again, this is something that's just up for discussion. And we're doing this early enough so that if we have to make decisions, we would have the time to kind of transition things out before we get to the spring.
Ms. Kinzer?
Let me look at option 3, just a question here. So let's take a school, and I'll just pick one, Highland Park Elementary. 97% free and reduced, or poverty level, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that would make you staff them at 16.5. Is that what that means?
It would not apply to them, only to our middle and high schools, actually. All this only applies to grades 5 through 12. We're still staffing our elementary schools at the state requirement of K3 at 20 and 25 in 4th grade.
Okay, well,
But we could, but I'm open to it. We could look at doing that. But I figure if we did that for that school, for our elementary schools, we'd be putting a lot of staff in our elementary schools.
but that's really where it's needed, when these schools that have those kind of extra, I mean, really
True.
and truly, that's where it's needed. And,
True.
all right, then let's pick a high school or a middle school. Mount Pleasant Middle, okay, at 93%. All right, so they would then be, their staffing would be at 16.5, is that what you're saying?
16.5.
Right, okay. You know, I don't understand completely all of these ratios and everything. I do know that when you say you're gonna have a ratio of 15-1 at the unit schools, which, I mean, we all know that small classes and class size is what's gonna be best for kids and what's gonna help, but we don't have that at the big schools. So, yet you're still maintaining, you want to keep those class sizes big at the bigger schools, still maintaining the smaller ratio at those schools that have it. I'm just saying from a budget or whatever standpoint here, at a 15-1, it takes 3 teachers to teach 45 students. We're paying each one of them $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 a year with benefits and everything. But at the big schools, Spring Hills, Whitthorne, Central, all of those, at 20, it takes 2. It takes 2. And I just want to do what's best for kids, and I would just love to be able to say we'll just have this really small classrooms all across the board because that's what's best for kids. But I don't want to penalize those schools, and I don't want them to not have the opportunities either. I don't think there ought to be classes with less than 5 kids in it too. I don't think we should pay somebody $60,000 to have a class where somebody at another school may be teaching as many as 30 in a class, and that 30, 35, and that exists. We know that. So I don't totally understand what we're doing. I just want to do what's best for kids, and what you're saying is what's best for our budget, what's best for staffing, what's best for how you can hire them. What in here is going to be best for kids so that they don't lack the instruction and the class size that it can afford them those opportunities?
Thank you, Ms. Kinzer. I'd like to speak to that. I'd like to use Columbia Central as an example, if that'd be okay. And this is going back to last year, looking at their enrollment at the end of the year, it was somewhere around 1341, but they had 88 teachers total. And so when I look at all the number of teachers they have there, their ratio is 1, that's 15-1. So and that's, again, that's not necessarily class sizes, that's just teacher to pupil.
May I ask you a question about that? When you gave us those figures, you had Ms. Lawson, the guidance teacher, with a class of 1, a class of 3, a class of 2, and those were kids that were going to Columbia State. That wasn't a classroom, but yet that was figured in, correct?
No, what we gave you was, those were just, in that last one was just letting you see how many students were in every class, everyone that was assigned to a class. Right. But it was not a teacher-pupil ratio.
Okay.
Yeah. So when you look at just the number of students on hand and how many staff they have, it averages out to about 15-1. That doesn't mean there's 15 students in every class at Columbia Central. It just means that the ratio of teachers to staff is about 15-1. As we raise that number up, if we bump up the teacher-pupil ratio to 18 or 20 or so, then class sizes will get a little bigger. And so again, that's what I was asking you and seeking input about and working with principals on is where do we find the sweet spot so classes aren't so big that we don't get the achievement that we want, but then we're not so heavy with staff that we're outside of our budget either. So we're looking for the sweet spot in this. This is going to be an ongoing conversation while we'll need your input, and I'm working with principals as well, because the fear that I have is that when we look at our small schools, they kind of get crushed by some of this also. So it is going to be a work in progress. I just wanted to bring you what we have discovered up to this point, and I'm going to do some more digging and talk to more counties. I've spoken with Warren County, and I called them, and I called Bobby Cox, superintendent. I said, Bobby, what do you all do? How do you decide how many teachers to put in your schools? They didn't have a formula. Yeah, I'd like to look at what Williamson County has. I don't know anyone there, but I can definitely try to establish. I'd like to see what their formula is. Do you know what it is for them? 22 to 20?
I have seen it, and I think it's online, but I'll try to get a copy of it if you want to.
I know Metro Nashville has one that's like 22.5, I think, to 1, but that's a big district. We're not there. So we need to be somewhere, I think, around 16, 16.5-ish for us, for this county, looking at where we are. I mean, we can't even begin to compare it to the size of a school that has 88,000 kids, but, you know, I'm looking for a county that's similar in size that does have one. So I'm going to try to look at Wilson County. Wilson County has about 16,000 students, and they're similar. Superintendent over in Dixon has about 9 or 10,000 students. I want to look at Dixon County's model and see what they're doing. But we have to decide, how do we staff our schools? How do we create a sense of equity among schools? And how do we stay within our budget with the number of staff that we have in schools?
So I guess going over some of this, it just kind of brings lots of questions. You want to be fair and equitable. I know that's been brought up quite a bit. I guess my question is, my kids go to a unit school. I went to a unit school. I see a lot of value in unit schools. But I guess, so there's fairness and equity, and there's fairness and equity. Say a unit school does have, sometimes they do have classes that have a 1-to-5 ratio or 1-to-3 ratio. More often than not, they're in the average, where they have the average numbers in any other school. But in doing this, what about the other aspect of this that I'm seeing is and that's going to be the academics. So to me, the unit schools, they don't get the academics that some of the bigger schools do. So Central, Spring Hill, the programming's not there. So, you know, all the unit schools, we have Spanish. We don't have French. We don't have German. We don't have Russian. We don't have anything else. We're okay with that. If we wanted our kids to learn those other languages, we'd send them to Central or Spring Hill. But right now, it's a give and take. We have smaller classrooms in some of them, but we don't have the offerings. So to me, if this is going to be a whole encompassing project or plan, it needs to be across the board fair and equitable. And either we're going to offer all the same classes to all the same students, or we're going to not. We're going to offer at Culleoka the same thing we're going to offer at Central, which is less. So I guess I'm just kind of seeing here where you're not going to be fair and equitable no matter what you do, because you can't. In reality, we can't offer the same classes at Central that you do at Culleoka. I understand that. But to me, it's a give and take. I send my kids to a smaller school to get a smaller student ratio and not have the offerings. And I would say, I'd guarantee you that if any other parent that their kids go to unit school would say the exact same thing. So I guess I'm just kind of curious as to, you know, is this going to affect our scores in any way? Is this going to help our scores? And if so, how?
Thank you, Mr. Howe. The thing that impacts student achievement the most, of course, is having a great teacher in the classroom. That's the number one thing. You know, having a great principal in every school and having a highly effective teacher in front of the kids every day is going to impact student achievement the most. But to answer your question, you know, I get it. I understand the value that you see in the unit school. I understand that. I think in the example that Ms. Kinzer used in some of those smaller classes, and I'm going to ask my CTE director to come up here in just a minute, Dr. Brown, if you'd make your way. I think where we find some of our smaller classes sometimes are in those CTE classes that we're not filling. And then when you look at a 7-period day, across a 7-period day, you know, we're stretching that out, and then you have 3 here, 5 here, 6 here. So we're not getting the most bang for the buck. My proposal is that every principal will have a staffing ratio, and I'm gonna box principals in to hiring, to making their master schedule based on the number of teachers that they're allocated. And again, they only go above that when their enrollment dictates that they will. But then here's the beautiful part, Mr. Howell, they have this autonomy. If I'm not filling up classes in maybe one of my CTE programs, I'm just picking on CTE, Dr. Brown, but if I'm not filling up classes in my ag program, okay, I can now cut that program, and now I can offer French. So in areas where they don't have, where they're not filling the classes, they have the principals have the autonomy to cut a program and then add programs that the students and parents want to have in their schools while staying within the confines of a specific number that does not, that's working within our budget as a county, because everyone's gonna have an allocation based upon their specific enrollment projection. So that's where we create a sense of equity, fairness, and it gives principals the opportunity to make their programs desirable. But sometimes you have to give up something. So they'll have to give up something. You know, maybe I love this ag program or that ag teacher, just love that person to death, but I'm getting 5 and 6 kids interested every year when we do the registration process. No one's really interested. Maybe that program has to go so we can bring in something else like culinary or some other program that kids have an interest in. So that's the way that we would do that. And so if we did that, it would create the equity that we're looking for.
I guess my question is, we know that the programs that are offered, the classes that are offered in the school, sometimes dictates where the kids go to school. And so that changes the number. For example, Mount Pleasant, up until 2 years ago, there was no AP classes, no dual enrollment classes. So the kids that needed those were leaving, so that the enrollment went down, and then there was less chance to get those. So now we're seeing the enrollment at Mount Pleasant High School go up because the kids that aren't leaving there, they're and going to Central or somewhere else, they're staying there and taking their classes there. So how do we make sure that we're not sending kids somewhere else for the classes because of the numbers that we're looking at?
I think some of those shifts happen through the open zone process. You know, kids can just choose to go somewhere else.
But they were choosing for a definite reason for the specific classes that were offered at the other schools.
Correct. And that may be why they chose to use the out-of-zone process to go somewhere else. You know, the idea is to build up all of our schools so that they're all great, so that, you know, people will want to attend their zone school. But I've always said people will vote with their feet. They will go in the areas where they feel they're getting the best deal and that are most desirable. And that's why we have to make all of our schools great, just to be honest. Otherwise, I think we'll have a mass exodus. And that is the sense of academic urgency that I've talked to my department about and talked to principals about.
Well, it's easy to sit here and say, you know, we'll cut this program's not popular, we'll cut this program. I can't speak for all the other schools, but I know at Kellyoka, there is no unused classroom. There's very few, even in CTE classes, they're generally full, all of them. It's a full school. But, you know, I disagree. People won't always vote for their feet, especially in your unit schools. These aren't just schools. These are communities that people live in and have lived in and will want to live in. And they don't want their kid going over here or over there. I mean, I think we've seen that from the rezoning process. They want their kid to go where they live. And yeah. And so I don't think that it's just as simple as just a reallocation of things. You know, if you box people in, you're not going to always, if you back somebody in a corner, you don't always get what you think you're going to get. So I think this is something worth pursuing, it sounds like, but I'm not sure of any of this yet. I think there needs to be a lot more work done going forward. You know, and as far as looking at unit schools, I don't think it's that hard. You know, I said here, some of these numbers look hard. It's not. There are 3 schools in one. I mean, would you group Mount Pleasant Elementary, Middle, and High School together? They're a campus school. They operate really the same as any unit school, other than they have. So you break out your unit schools into an elementary, middle, and high school, and whatever ratio or plan we go with, I don't see why you wouldn't apply those separately.
Thank you. First thing I want to say is I appreciate that you guys are going this direction and looking at something, because I think we need to do something. And I don't know, honestly, I'm not an expert in any of these things. Some of them look better. I mean, option 3 to me kind of looks more fair, but you can take that for the big bucket of salt right in front of me. I just don't know. But I will say I'm glad that we're looking at something to set some standards. I think from the budget discussions we've had over the last 6 or 8 months, it's obvious we need to look at putting some standards in place. I think I would agree with Mr. Howell that some more you know, you're going to keep looking at this and refining it, but I'm glad that this is the direction we're going, where we're going to set some standards for our schools, whatever they may end up being, and we stick to those. I think we're heading the right direction of normalizing some things so that we're not just kind of where you just end up and all of a sudden maybe one school has, through time and just various features, has more staff, and then other schools end up with just less because of some random reason. I just want to remove that random portion, and at least if whatever we're doing, we're being intentional about it. So I do like that part. We're being intentional about this.
Mr. Moore, you're exactly right, and that's what has happened over time. You have some schools that just have more staff for some reason, and principals don't call and say, hey, I've got too many staff. Particularly if you're being paid based on the number of teachers you have. They don't call and say, I have too many. So now you got to put a process in now to regulate some of this, right? As we continue to look at our budget, we have to, you know, because we are growing, but at the same time we have to have a process to regulate all this. How do we regulate this growth and keep class sizes comfortable? So it's kind of a part of that right sizing thing that we're talking about, but we're doing it in a very gentle way where principals will have the autonomy to decide what goes, what stays, and they get awarded their positions earlier so they can hire earlier and choose from the best candidates. But thank you for the input. I will continue to flush this out, and I'd like to come back and bring it to you again, and I apologize we went so long.
One last comment. I'm sorry.
I'm not sure what proposal I like. I think there has to be more work done to it. But I do agree with principals being paid on the number of students in the school, not the number of teachers that they have in the school. Because principals are human just like everybody else. If I can hire 2 extra teachers and make $100 extra a month, good news for me. I'm not saying they do that. But I think paying them per student or student capacity is fairer than any other way.
Dr. Woodard, in this Formula 3, you looked at poverty as being one of the, I guess, considerations for weighting it. You also mentioned in the first model that special ed and ELL could also be a consideration. Obviously, if you're just looking at poverty, how are those addressed in other schools? Are there, I would assume that there's already certain ratios that we have to maintain in special ed, but I don't know, maybe 2 for ELL. Is that true?
There's a state formula for ELL, and Lisa, if you, I think it's 40 to 1 in ELL.
30 to 1.
Is it down to 30?
Yes.
At one time it was 40 to 1. Yeah. Yeah. The BEP Blue Book is ever changing, but it used to be 40 to 1. That's 30 to 1. And special ed, I think, is by state is astronomical. What is it, like 90 to 1? I think by the state. And now it's 20. We're about 25 to 1, I think, in our district. Am I right?
ELL has a very, very specific ratio. Special ed just promises that your classes will be smaller than, you will get more individualized attention. But special ed is, for funding, is all based on options. So special ed funding is based on how many services you receive. So a child who only gets like a reading intervention, they're considered an option 1. They're funded at 90 to 1. If you receive reading, math, and speech, you may be an option 2, depending on the number of hours of special education that you receive. So those funding ratios are all different. The highest one is 90 to 1. The lowest one is actually when you have a 1-to-1 assistant. You know, that's an option 6, and that's the maximum amount of funding that we get. Is that clear as mud? It's special.
All right. Well, thank you, Dr. Woodard, for bringing those considerations forward and continuing to look at that. And I think we've been going for almost 2 hours, so if it's all right with everybody, we will take a short break. And when we get back, we're going to actually skip ahead to zoning and facilities so that some of Mr. Breeden's guests will be able to speak. Thank you. Too much, they can't get their commission room done. So they need our help, possibly, in using. That's a compliment to y'all, though. But Mayor Eggles is here, and I guess if just talk about that briefly. If there's any questions related to that particular request. Is everybody okay?
Madam Chair, we have questions from an operational point of view because we haven't gotten much details about it.
Okay.
Our question would be, and I don't know, maybe Mayor Ogles can answer this, would they want to use any of our equipment, sound system, anything like that? What kind of setup would they, because typically we don't have a crew who sets up this room. We set it up ourselves, so I assume, and we'd be glad to give them access to the chairs and the tables, and would somebody set it up and then take it down when they're through? Or give us a setup and maybe, sometime the students at the school will set up before our meetings like this. So those would be the only questions we would have. And then, of course, there would have to be somebody to let them in and close the door and set the alarm and do those kind of things that we do as part. Of course, we have, an SRO comes, and I know they have officers at their meetings too, so we could work through some of those kind of things. The gate has to be locked and those sort of things.
And when I was just briefly talking with Mayor Ogles, I just mentioned the same thing, that I thought that maybe some of the logistics are things that, from an operational standpoint, we would need to know. Obviously, we have meetings set, and I know that he had indicated that they would work with us, but as far as who we have working systems and with our budget, crunch and all that kind of stuff, how that impacts us. And from what Mayor Ogles said, he and Dr. Marzak have not gotten into the particulars of that. I think they wanted to know if this body is somewhat amenable to the use of this facility. Mayor Ogles, do you want to?
Yeah, our need currently, so we're bouncing back between our HR conference room and a meeting space at the bank, but what we cannot do is set up our voting system and leave it set. And so that's what we're needing, is a place where we can simply put our mics on your tables. They can be left there. But that way, again, for recording and reporting purposes and transparency purposes, we're really not in an ideal situation, because with all of the mics have to be looped together. And so they're not really designed to be unplugged and plugged in constantly, because you'll end up replacing the hardware. So what we talked about, or Dr. Marzak and I talked about, was we would put a row of tables out front here, and then we would set up our system in tandem with yours. And of course, y'all would be welcome to use it, but we wouldn't necessarily need your equipment because we have our own. We have two different types of systems, but our need is the ability to set up and leave it. We've got about a 6 to 8 month construction window. They can correct me if I'm wrong. We prefer 6 months. I think they're saying 8 months, so we're somewhere in the middle.
Okay. Just personally, I'd love to see us, if it's not going to impact our meetings, I would love to see us explore this. I think it's, having gone to a couple of meetings at the bank where they're at, it's definitely not very conducive for the public to come to those, or anybody else. So if it's something that doesn't impact our meetings and it can benefit the county on that, I would be more than happy for us to work together, as long as the logistics can be worked out.
And I absolutely want to agree with Mr. Moore. I think that's a wonderful idea. I'd really like to be able to use our video system and maybe start a YouTube channel like we do, because looking for anything on the county's website, whether it be one of the budget committees or the actual meeting, and then finding there's like 9 different ways that it's done, I think it'd be great if you want to use the video systems, and we could probably figure something out or work something out. It'd be wonderful if you had a YouTube channel. That'd be great.
I don't mind doing it. I just like to make sure it don't disrupt the students. I don't know what they use this area for during the.
Yeah, this is not just used for a boardroom. It's used for multiple things. We do have student activities during testing time. Of course, hopefully, this will be over before testing time. I don't know how much longer they've got before they'll be in their. There's a lot of professional development and other meetings that happen in this room. The challenge would be setting up, basically up there static. That always stays the same, so we can leave that same. Everything on the floor changes almost day to day. I guess, and I'll yield to Dr. Marzak, because we want to help any way we can. I don't want in any way to discourage this. We want to help any way we can, but whether we could commit to leaving, however many tables sitting across the front that we would never change, I don't know. We could try that, but this room is used by a lot of different people. So if we could leave everything around this everything you see that's around the side and around the front, we could certainly commit to never changing that. And then on the video system, we certainly could bring our tech people in to train whomever they'd want to train to come in and operate the system. I think the technology department for the county kind of did that in the regular meeting room, so they might be available to help do that and do that kind of stuff. So yeah, we can work with them any way possible.
Yeah, as long as it don't disrupt our daily operations here at school. So, and the second thing is, if we're out any kind of personnel for being here, I'd like to see us get compensated for that, or anything like that needs to be, because our budget is so tight, we want to make sure we're taken care of too on that side.
I was just going to say, looking at the space, the linear footage, we might be able to fit our entire, 22 kind of on the perimeter there. Again, I don't want to disrupt your meeting and go up there, but there's quite a bit of space. It's more space than we're using now. So.
I think anything we can do to accommodate the county commissioners, we should do. Again, keeping in mind that we don't want to disrupt whatever goes on in here during the school day. And I'm sure that the county will work with us to make sure that doesn't happen.
Well, Mayor Eagles, I think staff will definitely work on pursuing what we can do to make this place accommodating to
Yes,
the
ma'am. Well,
commission.
thank you all, and thank you, Madam Chairman.
No problem. Thank you. All right, we're going to go ahead and move on to zoning and facilities. So I'll turn it over to Mr. Breeden to lead us through this section.
I'm going to let them to go ahead and switch over where I can access the screen, if that's okay, because we've got several attachments that we want to refer to. I'll come up here in just a second. I'm up there. Okay, let me get on what we're talking about right now. The first thing we have are our regular reports, and I won't pull those up unless you have any questions, but there is a report from our architect that hopefully you've had an opportunity to look at, giving you a summary of where we are on the Battle Creek schools. Of course, Ben Metz from ESA is here tonight, and he could answer any questions if you have those about that report. Also, you will see the update on both of those schools from Hewlett Spencer, and Mr. Hewlett and Mr. Spencer are both here tonight, and I'm sure they can answer any questions. So unless you want me to pull up those reports and go through those, or ask them any questions. Do you have any questions for them?
I just want to know, make sure everything's on track. We're good?
Yes, sir.
That's all I need to know.
Also, you can see following that are the train updates on the projects that are currently ongoing. Mr. Nevada's here. One of the big ones, is the lighting project, and we're just about to wrap that up, I think. And so that's detailed in there. There's some other work they're doing for us, but we'll follow that same process for the train update if you all have any questions.
Mr. Breeden, I know in there y'all are tracking the utility costs, and it looks like those kind of were fluctuating a little bit more than we thought. Are we hoping to see a more downward trend in the future here?
I'm sorry, tracking utility costs at where?
The dollars per square foot number in the train report?
In the train report? I'm going to have to look at that because I'm not sure exactly what you're referencing.
It was around $1 in September 15.
Oh, that number right there, I'm sorry. Yes. I will, those numbers actually are before the lighting project began. And there are some changes there, but you will always see that seasonal trend. We may use more utilities in the summer than we do in April or October. So you're going to see a line that goes like that that's a little bit seasonal. But
Why would it be so much different in 2016 versus
Yeah.
2017 in those months?
okay,
So that's actually the new Columbia Central High School.
okay.
Coming online?
Yeah, and that, what that was tracking it pre-construction, through construction, and you guys have added 50,000 square feet to the school. And actually, your utility spend is now below what the old school used to be, so good job. No, so the project's worked out pretty good.
And I appreciate Mr. Nevada reminding me about that. It's been a couple of days since I looked at this. We had asked them that because the overall dollars have gone up, but we've got more square feet. And so the actual cost per square foot is down. So he had checked that for us. And I think if you'll remember back a few months ago, that had been addressed with the board, that they were investigating utility usage at Columbia Central High School. So that is not the entire district.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then as far as the Marvin Wright issue, I feel like we've talked about the sewer and the breakage and it looks like
You
now
wanna
that's on
speak to that,
hold.
too? Yeah, come up here because this is all being videoed, Owen, so I'm just gonna hold this right here for you.
I've talked to a couple of you offline, so, yeah, the Marvin Wright sewer issue is one of those open items that have been somewhat problematic. At this point, I can't even remember how far back we had a clear-cut path to correct it. We had some camera footage of 3 breaks, and we were gonna go line the pipe, and then when we got to go do it, there were more breaks and more rocks. Anyways, just to save you a long story, there's an active situation with the sewer line at Marvin Wright on that wing where we've got now more breaks. And so there's a team that's been put together to do a reassessment. We're actually going to do some ground penetrating radar on fall break to make sure that we're not dealing with some larger geological issues before putting a larger plan in place to do it over the summer break of 2019. One of the challenges is that line runs right down the middle of the school. And so to replace the line, so to speak, in its current location would be a fairly disruptive process. And so the team is looking for alternative paths, maybe to run a new line outside the school and bring laterals in and make connections and things like that. But we hope to have a fully baked out plan. Unfortunately, the early on diagnosis and remedy wouldn't work. So it was never done. And so that's kind of the long and short of it. It's more of a disruptive repair than it is an expensive repair, but it'll have some cost to it. But the biggest thing is dealing with cutting concrete and refinishing and stuff like that. So.
And I think you all are also doing some studies to make sure, as far as just the geology under the building, or whatever you would call that, is.
That's the ground penetrating radar coming in on fall break. So.
But we do have some significant issues there that primarily appear to be just from settling of the building, from, again, one of those, some improper construction methods that were used. I don't know that anybody can pinpoint exactly the details, but as we pointed out to you at a school we had recently, the problems we ran into at Riverside as we were doing some repairs, just always proper attention, proper construction methods have not been used. When you go in and fill in an area, there's a right way to do it, and unfortunately that's not always been adhered to. And of course, we depended, and again, I'm not here trying to throw anybody under the bus, but our prior procedure was we depended on an architectural firm to ensure that everything was being built to the standards it's supposed to be built to. We hired an architect, we hired a contractor based on whoever gave us the cheapest price, the low bid, and then we trusted that everything was going to be built correctly. And unfortunately, we've run into problems in some of those situations where they're not. And sometimes you don't uncover that till years later. And this is one of those situations, it appears. Is that a fair assessment?
We hope, actually.
Yeah.
We hope we don't have some.
Yeah, we hope it's not, there's seismic activity in that area, I guess is what you call it. I don't know. I'm way out of my lane right now. But
Is there any impact on the school though with the sewer issue? I mean, that just sounds like something that we don't want to get backed up or any of that stuff.
as you know, we've had backups in the past. We continue to monitor it very regularly now.
Okay.
One of the things that's happening, as a matter of fact, our maintenance department has now bought our own camera that we can run through. That's one thing we bought this last year with some savings that we had in our budget. It was about a $9,000 camera system that you can run through our lines, and so they're learning to use it and they're checking it regularly. So when we find those, we're staying on top of it.
Thanks, Mr. Breed, for being proactive. All right.
I did want to speak to and let me just go back and say, Train's been helping train us on that and work with us. That's part of the partnership we have there is not only do they fix stuff for us, they help our maintenance department learn how to do what we need to do. We've done that in the HVAC area and now the plumbing area, and so just throw that in. Moving on to the project cost report, we have our capital projects cost where we track the costs of everything that the funds that we have. You will notice that we've added a new section to that. It's at the very beginning. That shows the most recent bond that has just been approved. We actually have not received these funds yet. In speaking with Mr. Lukonen, the county budget director, he anticipates the bond will be sold and the funds available sometime around the 1st of October. But we've gone ahead and added this to our report, and the items in red are what's on the agenda tonight for you to approve. You know, we always put them in red. If you approve them, we turn them to green. So it shows you how we track all the different funds we have and what's remaining in those funds that we're actually spending. And of course, we try to keep this report updated for you, and once an item is completed, we actually remove it from the report. For instance, if you went down to the section that says the capital outlay projects 16-17, that was the bond that we got back in 16. And while it shows we started with $17,974,000, we're down to really only $4,307,000 is still money that's pending. All the projects in green are ongoing. They're not finished. And you can see where we're at on funds on that. And really, that's the one I particularly wanted to talk with you about, because the next report actually is just to track those bond funds. And what we've done is we have taken all of the outstanding items from that remaining 16 bond, and we've added to it all of the items that we have outstanding through 17 and 18. So these are the items that were identified in the EMG assessment. For those of you who are new to the school board, about 2.5 years ago, we brought an outside firm in called EMG that did a facilities condition assessment and identified all of the equipment and the areas of our facilities that needed to be maintained. And so what they did is they did a 20-year projection that, based on the age of the facility, the condition of the equipment, each year this is what you might need to replace: an air conditioning equipment, roofs, floor tile, repainting the building, and they put together that schedule. Now, they identified up front that we had $29 million worth of repairs that were past due needing to be made. And so that's what we began to tackle with this $16 million bond. And with the $14 million bond, we've added to that. And we added to the list not just what was due in at 16, but we've added what they had identified would possibly need to be replaced in 17 and 18. And so on that 16 list that we originally got funding for, because we only got funding for $16.5 million out of the original $29 million list, of that, we have completed $13.8 million. It's right at the top of the second page, right up here. That's really small. You can't see it. $13 million. So there's about $2.7 million worth of items that are yet to be addressed on that original list. Of that, about $1 million is at McDowell School, which of course we have deferred working on until we make a decision on the finally what direction we're going to McDowell. Another $1 million of that is for an HVAC system at Hampshire Unit School. The board had kind of
expectation for where we are. So there's good news in this. The good news is we're going to bring you lots of items to approve, because a lot of it's going to be over $10,000, and we're going to do a lot of things really fast. We have to spend the money by the end of June this year. The bad news is this is a conversation that adds directly to your buildings about, it's not just an old building anymore. It's not just a building that we think to need to be updated. Is it a safe building? Do we meet the recommendations? How do we retrofit buildings that were not built under these standards to at least look like we are trying to address the standards that the state has now given us? So that's a quick synopsis of it. The good news is we're getting $412,000 that you guys don't have to ask anybody for. It's just here. So any questions? Awesome. It's late. Thank you guys for your time.
Thanks, Mr. Perryman. And kudos to you for only having to do one reading on that. That sounds like that's a real accomplishment with anything from the state.
There's a couple other
Playground?
items. Yeah, playground equipment. What we have for you here is a bid to approve for playground equipment. Let me just speak to it very briefly. Originally, the playground for Battle Creek Elementary School was a part of the GMP submitted by Hewlett Spencer. What we have done is they and Bell Construction have worked with us. We actually contacted 4 playground manufacturers, had them submit programs to us. They submitted programs that could be purchased using a cooperative purchasing network that we can buy through without having to go through a bid process. We actually got a committee of students at Marvin Wright Elementary to help us pick amongst those 4. I want to thank Ms. Massey for that. She spearheaded that, recruited students to help her choose that. They helped us pick which playground they liked best, which manufacturer. And so then we went back to Bell and we started negotiating with the playground company and found out if we bought it directly from them, contracted just like we do for the furniture, we could actually save sales tax, and we can buy it cheaper than Bell can buy it. And so they have agreed, and Hewlett Spencer, to deduct that from their contract if you will agree to do that and let us buy that directly from the playground company. And the proposal that is there is, I can open that attachment real quickly, is, you all have it there, but I can't remember the exact number. It's $118,280.20. The company that we be buying it from is Great Southern Recreation. They actually, if you'll remember, a few years ago, we contracted with them to upgrade. We did a playground upgrade using some of our bond money and put some borders and mulch, and they're the company that actually worked for us then. So we have experience with them, had very good experience with them. And these funds will be using the TCPN network to buy with cooperative pricing for that. So that is what we're recommending that you approve, and this will come out of the budget for Battle Creek Elementary. Basically, we'll deduct it from the GMP, and it'll go into us buying it directly from them.
Okay, so this will be in the estimate that Dr. Marzak's working on for opening the school, correct?
No, sir, this is money that's from the bond.
Yeah, but I mean, that's still gonna be a cost to open the school, correct?
It is not a cost to any budgeted funds. This is the money that was allocated for the building funds for the building.
I understand that.
So
But it's still gonna be funds through the school for that school that's being opened, correct?
No, sir. It's just like the money we're spending on paying Hewlett Spencer and the furniture and the low voltage. It comes out of the $65 million bond. So the money that he's working on is money that comes out of the budget, I think. I don't, yeah, this is all capital funds. I guess I'm not understanding
Okay.
what you're expecting from him.
What I'm looking for is what is it gonna cost to open those 2 schools?
Okay.
And so this won't be part of that budget, correct?
That's right.
Okay.
Yes, sir. This
All right.
will not. Yeah, this is the money that was budgeted to build the 2 schools.
Okay, all right.
That's what this is
I
from.
just misunderstood.
Yeah.
All
Yes, sir. I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Okay.
Any objection to this being put under consent? Mr. Dudley?
Will the savings from this be able to be used for other shortcomings?
Actually, what they did was they had an allowance, and their allowance was $150,000. Now, there's some concrete work that they've got to do. So the total of their concrete work and this is about 140, so the $10,000 will roll back into our contingency fund for the building. So the shortfall, they don't keep. If you remember, they operate off a contingency, and any unused contingency comes back to us at the end of the job, so that rolls into our contingency.
So what I'm saying, this is not money that we had to give back to the commission.
No, sir, it is not. It stays in the building fund.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
All right, see no lights. We move on to parking lots.
Yes. Get back on the agenda, so I'm,
Number
what we
14.
did was, earlier this year, we bid, some parking lot work. If you remember back, you had approved last year that we took the EMG and we started working on the parking lots that were identified. There were 4 that we hired Civil Site Design to help us put together a bid package. Those were parking lots at Brown Elementary School, Spring Hill Elementary School, Spring Hill High School, and Hampshire. Oh, there's 5. Oh, Mount Pleasant Elementary, there's 5 schools. And so what we did is we put it out for bids, and the bid came back more than we had money for, so we couldn't bring this to you. We tried to get the bidder to do just one of those schools because we had enough money to do one, and none of the bidders would work on just that amount of the project. So now that we have the additional money, we're going to go back and start attacking those. There's enough money to do several more. We're going to bring you back in the spring a recommendation to do quite a few additional parking lots. But we wanted to go ahead and try to get this done this fall. Now, what we did, right around, and we can put this back if you want us to, because we've actually talked to the contractor. He'll put this in. This bid, we pulled out the bid for Spring Hill High School, because if we were to do the addition at Spring Hill High School, we'd be paving areas that would get torn up. So we pulled that out, so it does not include Spring, but if you prefer, we've got the money now with the bond, and we can put the Spring Hill High School back in too, but we just felt like until a decision was made, it was prudent not to do that. So this would just be doing the work at Brown, Mount Pleasant Elementary, Spring Hill Elementary, and Hampshire, and it's a repaving package that we hope to get done before the pavers close down before the end of the year. Get the bond money in with your approval, and the entire bid, you have the document there in front of you. I'd have to open it to remember all the.
5643.
Yes, ma'am, thank you. And Dave, you can help me. It includes some contingency dollars in there.
Yeah, we pulled out some of the contingency that would have been a percentage of what we pulled out of Spring Hill High School, but there's still testing and
Proof rolling.
Proof rolling that needs to be done before that's before they put the asphalt back on, and then there's the construction management. What's that one item? I forget.
Construction administration.
Administration, that's right.
So this was the low bidder. I think we attached the bid sheets for you to see the bids that were taken. And this was the low bidder, which is D. Nickel Company. There were 3 companies who submitted: D. Nickel, Rogers Group, and Sessions, and this is the low bid. So we're recommending this bid to you, that we go ahead and get this approved and get the bond money in and get this paving done this fall.
Any objection to this going to consent? All right, we'll move on to software.
Yeah, and this software is probably a little bit misleading. This is really not a software project. When we did EMG, what it did for us is it allowed us to identify all of the equipment. And when I say equipment, I'm talking about HVAC systems, pumps, help me, Dave, any kind of piece of equipment that we have to maintain in our school district. And with that, we set up a preventative maintenance program in our school dude, and we are doing that. The only shortfall with that is we do not have that equipment tagged or mapped. So while it says we got X number of pumps at Spring Hill High School, our guys have to know when we go to work on this pump, it's this pump over here or this pump over there. And our guys have said sometimes some of our older guys know where all those are. Some of them are feeling it out. So what we've been looking for is a program that would actually put a physical tag with a, it doesn't have a barcode, it has what's the thing called, Tommy, the little squiggly thing? QR code, thank you. technology. It'll have a QR code, so our guys could go up with their tablet they use and scan that and immediately identify it's this pump that you're working on. And not only would do that, the software part of there's a software map that tags where every one of those pieces of equipment is in the building. So we've been talking to this company, Akita Box, and we have looked at for the whole district, but it's a pretty big project. So what we're recommending doing in phases. So the first phase, we're recommending that we start in our north zone because we have 3 zones. So this would be every school in the north zone. This cost is $30,000, Dave? And they would put together tag everything, map everything, put together the whole plan, and then now there is an annual cost for that software. This is the upfront cost, and then annually there would be a $3,600. Okay, annually to use the software to continue to access those maps. And once we get this done, we'll be looking to do it in the next zone and the next zone. We do have, if you remember last year, you took about a little over $600,000 out of fund balance for us to do repairs. There's 2 of those we still haven't done. One, that canopy in Culleoka I mentioned, and the other one is a replacement hot water system at Mount Pleasant High School. Well, the HVAC replacement program that we just presented to you tonight at Mount Pleasant High School, which we're going to pay all the bond money, includes replacing that hot water system. So we have the money saved from that we'd like to use to pay for this with, out of those capital funds we took out of fund balance last year. This is at $30,000. We actually had about $50,000 for the hot water system, but about $30,000 here. So we're recommending that we do that. We think it'd be for a couple reasons: tags and maps. Also, there are those of us like Dave and me and Murray and Ricky and some of us, we're not getting any younger. And in a few years, we're going to turn this over to somebody else. And we'd like to be able to turn over to them. You don't just have to go find all this stuff. We're leaving you with a map of every school that has every piece of equipment identified and everything labeled. And we just think it'd be the best way to maintain this for the long run.
Thank you, ma'am. Y'all know when I worked in a maintenance program down Redstone Arsenal, we got a software like this, and it saves man hours, big time. So I think it's be real good.
I'm sure it costs a whole lot more money than this, so. Will this program keep up with all your filters changing, all your?
That's probably one of the reasons that we,
That's what I was thinking about.
initiated this, is because it not only maps, some of us.
Speak into the microphone, you're on the record, you're being recorded.
So, some of us do know that places like in Culleoka and Santa Fe, we've got AC units that are up in the ceiling that only the rats and a few of the maintenance people know where they are. Yeah, and so for that reason too, is we needed to know exactly where they were, what size of filters there were, how many that they're needed to take, so it'll expedite getting things up there.
6-month changes, and it gives you dates and everything, when to change them, keeps up with all that.
It'll tie into our preventative maintenance program.
Okay.
Being on consent. All right, we'll move on to Mount Pleasant water invoice.
Oliver recommended, I spoke with him and he suggested I put this on here. I was contacted by the city manager of Mount Pleasant. They have discovered that when the field house was built, it was 2013, I think, when it was finished, for some reason they never started billing us for the water meter. And they've gone back and discovered all of a sudden nobody's been paying for the water there. Well, you may not remember, but that was built by the Booster Club and then handed off to the school district. They can't find any records of who signed for it. I asked for some paperwork to give us who signed for the water meter. Well, they don't have any of that. And they've gone back and estimated that we think you've probably used 250,000 gallons of water during this time, and we want you to pay this for that water. So they've sent us an invoice. Let me tell you this, though, and I don't know if this is the right thing to do or not, maybe the right thing's to pay the invoice, but I wanted you to probably okay that or at least acknowledge that before we paid it. We could maybe wait a little bit because they actually are having some property surveyed for the splash pad that they want you to donate to them in the next 30 days. So maybe we swap. I don't know. But I did want you to be aware of this.
Yeah, I think we have some person from the school sign for the water meter at the same time they cancel the bill and we donate the land. It's a good idea.
I don't know who would know this. Is the estimate that they've given us reasonably accurate based on information we have? Does anybody know, or did they just grab a number?
Ms. Calder called me today, and she said that, and I asked her the same question, how do you get that estimate? She said that the existing service was for the two bathrooms that were underneath the bleachers. When the bleachers were torn down, that water meter was removed and service was transferred over to the field house. Well, she says that it was a brand new meter and that the meter reading currently is around 250,000 gallons. So that's where they arrived at that number, is that with a new meter showing 250,000 gallons now, that the city of Mount Pleasant believes that's how much water you've used. She points out that you haven't been charged anything for the, because the meter was removed, that you've saved on that water usage. So we went through about 10 minutes of conversation this morning just trying to arrive at the figure and figure out where we go from here. She could not be here tonight. She said she would come to the meeting later in the month if you have questions about it, but we kind of talked that through today.
I had the same conversation this morning with a few people, and I don't know. The fact that, I was under the understanding that the field house belonged to the to the athletic boosters when they built it, and then they deeded it over to the school district. Is that correct, or is that not correct?
No, ma'am. It doesn't actually work that way. When it became affixed to your property, it became your property. So when it was lumber sitting out on not incorporated, then it was theirs. But when it became affixed to your real property, it became yours. So there was no deed. There was some misconception about that went around, but no, it's actually been yours the whole time.
Well, and apparently when they were building it and they got to the point where they needed water, they called the city. The city came out, put a meter in for nothing, and never charged, never put any paperwork, never charged. And I explained to her that that would be the city's fault that they did that. I'm just telling you that that was our conversation, so. But I also did bring up the fact that they will be asking us for property, and that might be a good bargaining chip.
Thank you, ma'am. Well, my concern is if they don't have any records, how can they prove that it was a new meter? Typically, utility companies have several meters on their trucks, and they go out there and put one in. It may have been at 0, or it may have been at 130,000 gallons already. So I think, we probably need to just see if we can come up with a swap as far as the land donation they're going to be asking for, and see if that's agreeable to everybody.
Do we have a written agreement going forward?
We do not, so we probably need to
Okay.
get something in place. We do not have anything. They just really just said, we'll just start billing you, and
Oh,
here's
well,
the bill.
With no signature, that's
Yeah,
great.
so
Yeah.
we probably would need to do that. It's a good idea.
Yeah.
Madam Chair, and that's true of most all your utility service. I mean, you use the use the service and you pay for it on a monthly basis. I will say that she did offer to let you guys pay it back over time at whatever you thought was appropriate. We ran into this a few years ago with the sprinkler system on the football field. That wasn't metered. The city wanted to go back and kind of retroactively charge for that. So this isn't their first rodeo when it comes to Mount Pleasant Utilities, but I will say that they do provide your water service. So, there's always a disconnect there that I guess theoretically the city of Mount Pleasant could impose. So all that to say that I understand if you want to negotiate with them, and I understand that there's a lot of proof issues that they don't necessarily have any paperwork, but do also know that they provide your utilities to that site.
And you need to know, they have been good partners with us on several things. They've changed lights on the football field for us and done lots of things the city has. So, I mean, there's a good relationship between the school district and the city. It's just, this is not that, we ran into a little issue on water with them last year where they said we had a big overusage at the elementary school, and we searched for leaks, and finally they had figured out their meter was bad, and it had recorded bad, and so they refunded. We had overpaid the bill quite a bit for several months, and they refunded it back, and so they did the right thing. So I'm not suggesting we not do the right thing, but I did want you to be aware of it.
I mean, is there some board action that you want us to take on this, or it sounds like board members have talked about essentially this being a negotiation.
I advised Mr. Breeden not to pay it without your guidance because it was not a ordinary course of business type bill. So if you take no action, then it won't be paid. If you want to hold that down the road when they come looking for that property, then certainly that could be just tabled until then, or just no action taken. But I do think it needed to come to you all to decide what you wanted to do.
All right, well, we can leave it on the agenda, and anyone can make a motion at the board meeting if they would like to see this bill paid. I would hope that they would not cut out service to our students. I would imagine they'd probably have some angry parents that would come see them as well. So I don't know that that's a good bargaining. So we've been going for another 2 hours. Anybody want to take a break? This will be our last one.
And before we break, can I just mention
I'm sorry,
my last
Serve
attachment?
Sunday, yes.
Serve Sunday, just you have a list of the projects. You all know that we had several churches who helped our schools over the Labor Day weekend. There's a list of all those donations of time and effort there, and we appreciate very much those churches and what they did.
Bids for the Apple iPads and the replacement backup server and storage unit. Any questions from board members on those two bids? Bid 19-015 and 19-014? All right, so we can move that to consent. Any discussion about the renewal of the advertising?
No, we can see it.
All right.
Speaking for myself.
All right. We'll go back to the lease agreement update.
I know it says Mr. Wolliver
Oh, sure.
and Mr. Schuyler, but let me tell you all quickly on that. Obviously, that wasn't funded in the budget. We have put together for you, and you have on the agenda attachment, here are the schedules of payment, and I'll go through real quickly with you those schedules. It shows you, and this is based on the most recent payment we've paid, so 1 year from then. But if you look over there, you almost have to work backwards up the list. But the first payment due on those leases was 8/27 of 2018, which is $110,000. The next payment, actually, got to go back to the top and start back down. The next payment would be on March the 3rd, 2018, of $92,000. Then there's a payment due May 26, 2019, $92,000. June the 8th of 2019 of $60,000, and June the 11th of $441,000. Plus, those are the leases we had already committed to. Plus, you had approved right before the end of school an additional $299,000 a year payment to add 1,300 additional laptops, which we have ordered but have not been fulfilled. And so and then I think Mr. Schuyler sent you where all of these leased laptops are, so you've got that. But basically, as we got into contacting Lenovo, actually I think they contacted us. They got wind of this before we even, and started talking about, okay, how do we work out of this process? At that point, legal got involved, and I turned it over to Mr. Wolliver, and he can probably share with you where we are on this whole process.
Let me start by saying Lenovo says it's never been through this with any district or anyone it's worked for on governmental contracts. So this is all kind of new ground. But as Mr. Breeden pointed out, you've got a series of leases. One of your payments on one of those existing leases for laptops that are already in the system came due on August the 27th. In the 2018 fiscal year, that is not appropriated. You don't have any money appropriated to make that lease schedule payment. You do have money left over from last year's budget or appropriated from last year's budget to pay the first installment of what you see at the very bottom of the schedule page, which is under the State of Tennessee rental program. So the discussion has been, are we better off as a system using that allocated money to pay for laptops that aren't yet in our system, or would it be better to go back and try to reallocate that money and pay for some of the computers that are already in system and being utilized in some form or fashion? The problem that we have with Lenovo, and there are maybe three different branches of the problem that we have. Lenovo obviously is the corporation that builds the computers. Lenovo Financial Services buys the computers from Lenovo and then basically rents those out to us. So it's not just one entity that we're dealing with. But Lenovo has already built the 1,327 units that you see at the bottom of the schedules, the first installment of which was about $299,000 that has now become payable, that has been appropriated. Lenovo is the big loser in all of this if you don't go forward, because it's sitting on those computers that it has built and designed to your specifications, put all the software on that you asked for, and those are sitting in a warehouse. So the conversation has been between the Maury County Public Schools, Lenovo, and Lenovo Financial as to how to allocate these funds. From our standpoint, we would rather that money be reallocated and used for systems that are already in the schools. Lenovo Financial is the same way. They would rather us use that money for existing leases rather than put new ones online. And then Lenovo would rather us take these computers that are sitting in the warehouse. So between the three of us, we asked for options. Maury County Public Schools asked for options as to, hey, what can we do? What will you allow us to do? The latest option on the table is that Lenovo has come out and said, if you will pay us $50,000, we will let you out of this new agreement. You can take the remainder of that $299,000 and reallocate it to Lenovo Financial for computers that are already in your system. We don't know what to do from here. Obviously, there are costs associated with if you have to turn in the laptops that are out there in the system already and put these new ones online. There are costs associated with that. We also don't know what Lenovo Financial will do. If you say, no, we're not going to pay that $50,000, we don't believe we're contractually obligated to pay that. Even though we ordered the computers, you built them, they're sitting in your warehouse, you can do other things with them, we're not going to pay that. Lenovo Financial, now that we've put them on notice that you're not going to spend any more money on the diploma program, could very well pull out a lot of the systems in the schools based on the fact that we're telling them that we're not going to appropriate those or any funds to pay those leases down the road. So there are a lot of unknowns. The one thing we do know is that if you want to keep the laptops that are in the system, we could reallocate the funds that are already appropriated for the new computers to the old computers and pay $50,000 in basically a termination fee and go that direction. So that's kind of where we stand. nobody contemplated that we would be here. Obviously, Diploma was, you ordered these computers back in January of 2018. At that point in time, you believed there was going to be funding there to pay these leases out into the future. So we're now trying to fix the issue, and currently what's on the table is you can pay Lenovo and basically buy your way out of the future lease to be able to pay the existing leases. If you choose to do that, there may be some room for negotiation there, but that's what's on the table at this point.
I don't know if Dr. Marzak wants to add anything. I'm looking at him. If there's any thoughts you have about the diploma program, Dr. Marzak, or you know, if we continue to try to hang on to what computers you can, because you can see basically if we use that money, we could almost get through another year before we had to turn them back in. Yeah.
So if those numbers are still solid, what I would like to do, if the board is amenable, is looking at the financials and realizing we have $1.4 million in fund balance, is allocating that $197,000 to continue to push us forward. And then this year we work with the county commission for additional funding next year to keep the leases moving forward. I hate to spend $50,000 to get out of a contract. Because that's money that we're just throwing away in my mind. Whereas if we do a little bit of investment now, we could possibly buy us a little bit of time to work with the county commission to give us greater investment down the road.
Dr. Marzak, let me just say, I was giving you a guesstimate, but it's $110,000 for the August payment, and then $92,000 for the March payment. So it's just a little bit more than that, but somewhere around $200,000.
Yes, sir. That's good.
And then the rest of them are not due until after school's out.
I will just say, I know that making the cuts to diploma was something that was hard for this board to do, and we spent a lot of time talking about it. And I don't know that it's anything that anybody wanted to do, but I think it was something that actually Dr. Marzak suggested when we were trying to make the budget cuts. So to now hear that we have this termination fee, I'm just a little frustrated that we got this far along, and then now we're at this point. It still doesn't address for me the concerns I have about the way that the program is actually used in certain schools, how devices are going to be deployed. Teachers that used devices last year don't have devices this year, or their kids don't have devices this year. Kids that had devices last year that are now in classes with teachers that didn't have devices last year and didn't use devices. There's just a lot of concerns overall for me about the program, and I think that those were some of the concerns that were raised at the budget time. And I find it very hard to believe that this is the only time that they've ever had a school system or somebody that they can't, that's walked away from this. So I don't know that we're going to come to a consensus on this particular item. Tonight, I think we're probably going to need some motions on the table as far as what we can do, but this is a tough one, because I still think that there's just some inherent problems with diploma in general. Mr. Moore?
Unless I miss it, what are our options here? I'm still a little confused because we kind of went back and forth. Am I the only one that's okay? Good, but because can you just put it down to maybe 2 or 3 options?
I was a lot more coherent about 7 o'clock. So here are your options. You do nothing. You've got $299,000 already allocated to put new computers into the system that are built and waiting on you. I say that's your option. I mean, there's a chance that Lenovo backs out of that and says, no, if you're telling us you can't fund that down the road, we're not going to put those computers in your system. They have not done that yet. You've allocated $299,000 for these 1,327. You could go ahead with that. You had a payment due of $110,000, and I'm using round numbers, that was due on August the 27th of 2018. So a few days ago, you had a payment that came to you. If you don't meet that and you have no money allocated to do that, you're going to have to turn those computers in that are already in your system. The $50,000 was a trade-off where they would say, okay, we'll leave those 1,327 computers in the warehouse. We'll do something else with them. If you want to take that money and use it on other Lenovo programs, you can go ahead and do that. So number one is you do nothing. You go ahead and use the money that's been allocated to put new computers in the system that we can only pay for a year. Number two, option number two, you pay the $50,000, you reallocate that $299,000 or whatever's left, $249,000. You pay the $110,000 lease payment that's come to you, and you use the remainder of that money to continue the lease payments for existing computers in your system as long as you can make those payments. Those are basically your two options as I see them at this point.
Okay, so just so I can clarify this, I'm sorry, it is getting late on this. So one option would be we've already kind of haven't made a payment on the ones that we already have. So we've got computers in kids' hands that we missed the payment for. So at some point, since we have no funds allocated, they're going to eventually ask for those back from the kids' hands. I'm just being clear on that.
Yes.
Okay.
And that some point is now, because we've asked them for more time to give us.
So that's coming
to give us options and to give those options to you.
The other piece of that is, and maybe I'm misunderstanding something, we have new ones that are supposed to be coming that are built. Did we still have money allocated to pay that?
Yes.
Some.
From last
year. So we would be giving back devices that are already in kids' hands, plus we're going to get some new ones in, and then for a year and be giving those back too.
Yes.
That sounds like a horrible option. I'm just me.
When
So I
you
don't
put
like
it in
that
those
one.
terms, the $50,000 doesn't look as bad because you're basically spinning your wheels to put.
So what you're saying, the other option would be to move some things around. We don't get the new ones that are coming, but we keep the ones that are in kids' hands now in there as long as possible, hopefully through the end of the year, which moves on to what Dr. Marzak was suggesting, was to carry on past that would be kind of a.
And
okay.
pay the $50,000 fee. That's right.
Okay.
Let me ask Mr. Wooliver, I guess a third option might be, if we had the money, we could keep the $299,000 payment going and find the money to pay the $109,000, whatever it is that's due right now. If we, 110 and the 92, if we had that money from somewhere.
Oh, yeah, option three is the green option where you throw some more money at this.
Yeah.
But yeah,
So
with
that
the,
is, I mean, that is
with
an
the
option.
existing funds that
Yeah.
we've been, yeah, there were two options, but certainly, I mean, money makes the world go round. So if you.
So I mean, that is possible, but just.
And that's the kind of the, yeah, that's what Lenovo's hoping for.
Yeah, that we find the money and just keep going.
Did we allocate for that 300,000 for the new computers? Did we allocate that out of fund balance?
That was
last year?
taken out of fund balance last year.
Fund balance last year. Okay.
Yeah, and that was taken out in the 17-18 budget, and it's encumbered against that. So the reports that you see tonight from Ms. Gagliana, it shows as being spent out of those 17-18 funds, right? Because there's a PO open encumbering that money.
Is there a way to unencumber those funds? With a budget amendment or whatnot, if we
If you
wanted
don't
to?
spend it and we close the PO, they go to fund balance. They go to fund balance.
Okay.
But if we do that, we still may have to pay $50,000, right?
Yes. And the budget amendments, not only from you, but the county, yes. I mean, there's going to be a process, whichever method you choose.
Mr. Moore.
I just wrap up my comments with, I don't see it making sense taking computers out of some kids' hands and bringing some new ones into somebody else to take them back out of their hands next year. So that option to me, I'm putting in those terms because to me that doesn't make sense. As we were reminded earlier about what's for the kids, that doesn't seem to make sense. I don't know what the real answer is, but that one to me doesn't add up. So I don't know where to go from there.
And if I could add something real quick, just for, and this is going to sound like I'm against what's trying to go on, and that's not even it. I wish every kid in Murray County had a device, but just for some new board members, we actually paid these devices that they're talking about. We paid $24,000 to have them imaged with our software for a one-time fee for the life of any time we ever got computers. They would already be imaged, and also, you know, the position that was running diploma was cut from the budget. So the things that we kind of gather and that we do is just based off spare time with Chris Seal and the staff, just kind of grabbing stuff. So, I mean, there would have to be some things fixed. I wish, you know, I would like to keep what we have plus move forward, which obviously is not my decision, but I just want to make everybody aware that we did already make an investment to get them imaged.
So we don't have any staff really to administer it anymore because we eliminated that position.
And that would be most critical if the 1,327, if you went the option one, paid it out, you bring 1,327 computers into our system that we really don't have the manpower to be able to re-image and do those things, or it would be a stretch.
We would have to come up with something. We're doing paper now. Instead of Care Monkey, we do paper. Hey, give the parent a paper, and we sign the paper, and we just bring it back because there wasn't an option.
You can't just take the boxes and hand them out to school and say, just give them out. You can have
You got a computer. Yeah. Where's Oprah? She's got plenty of money to fund this program.
Well, I mean, I think some of this depends on what the positions of the commission are. I mean, if they want our students to have computers, you know, that's fine and great, but they've got to provide funds for it. If they're not going to give us any additional funds next year for us to have a computer program, you know, we're just wasting our time. So, I mean, I think they could have found funds to give us to keep the computer program ongoing and then not disrupt it. But, you know, they decided they didn't want to do that.
Speaking of funds, you're talking about maybe they could fund it next year, the commission. We're going to be asking, we're going to open 2 schools that have to be staffed. And that's going to cost a lot of money, and I don't know where we are in making the plans for that. I've heard figures of when the middle school was open, it was an excess of a little more than $1 million for staff. Those are things that we're going to have to ask the commission to help us fund, because you know what it was like just getting our budget for the present staff. So to say maybe they'll have the funds to start diploma back or do it, I mean, let's be realistic here. And we're also talking about capital projects, asking for this, asking for that. And Tommy makes a good point. Deploying them it's a whole different ballgame right now, you know. The ability to get them out to students, to track them and all that.
Personally, I'd like to see us get through the year. I know Mount Pleasant High School is completely on these devices, and their teachers are teaching from them. That's the I think if we saw some of the scores, I think that had something to do with it. That's just my opinion. But their scores were up quite a bit this year, and but they've got the plan for the rest of the year is to, I mean, that's what their plan is. They have no other electronics at the school, am I right, Tommy? Yeah. And I know that that's the same. I think Hampshire is pretty much the same way. So if there's a way, I hate that it would cost us $50,000 to do that, but if there's a way to keep these devices at least until the end of the year, and then let the teachers and staff, the ones that have the devices, plan on not having them the next year.
All right. Seeing no other lights, we'll move on to district administration salary comparison information.
The board had asked for an updated salary comparison for administrator salaries. We did this with surrounding counties as well as Murray County government. That's normally what you utilize is the geographic area. And so that's what the spreadsheet reflects. We used data from both the budgets that were posted online and also taught to the district HR director to get these numbers. Now, I know I've heard principals and assistant principals, and we are moving towards developing a salary schedule based on student enrollment. Right now, ours is based on staff, number of staff, and so we'll be bringing that to you all later on. But for right now, I'm just bringing what the board asked for, just an updated comparison of salaries.
One thing I will mention at the financial management board meeting for the county, their HR director said that we're in the process of looking at doing a comparison of their salaries, and that they have certain companies that they asked to come in and look at salaries to see how it stacks up against others. Ms. Gagliano shaking her head. So I think that's something that would be beneficial for us, as opposed to just even looking at administrators, as far as principals. What Dr. Woodard, what you were talking about with regards to not having it be based on number of teachers, I think that makes sense. But at the same time, I think we need it to be as comprehensive as we possibly can. And in looking at the current administration salary schedule, I don't know if that's adequately compensating our staff or not in some cases. But I would like for it to be something that is useful and is a guide that can be followed for the benefit of everyone, I think.
So are you wanting principal and assistant principal comparisons because we have that information? Are you wanting like market value for other jobs in manufacturing?
I'm not wanting
that sort of thing.
I'm really wanting to see about having somebody come in and do this. What that would cost and what that would look like, I don't know.
Because a lot of if you're comparing just principals and assistant principals, a lot of that information is available already.
Right.
Without having to pay for it. So if you're wanting somebody to come in and do like a cost analysis for market value as far as other types of jobs that compare, I mean, you can most definitely do that. But you're going to have to compare job titles and what their job descriptions are, because the same title in a school system may be completely different in a manufacturing environment.
True. But also a principal at one of our schools may be completely different than a principal in Williamson or Rutherford County, where I believe somebody said tonight that the elementary school was 1,000 students. So I think we need something that more closely looks at apples to apples and oranges to oranges, as opposed to what I feel like we have now, which is apples to oranges in a lot of instances. It's a good start, but I don't know that anybody on our staff has the time to be as comprehensive as we may potentially need it to be in order to make sure that we're planning for the future and planning for how we're going to move forward with a salary schedule that Dr. Marzak feels comfortable following. Ms. Gagliano.
Just wanted to say, in my past experience, we did have various outside entities do various types of salary studies for different groups of employees, and you can get as detailed as having them compare based on student body, number of enrollment, cost per pupil, what you actually spend, expenditure per pupil, population, their experience, years of experience, local, like in the system, and then outside of the system, their educational, like whether they have bachelor's, master's, and so, I mean, you can get really detailed that way, too, and just stay in the school market, or you can do like Amanda said and compare to what you're competing with in the area for the same type of work. So it just depends on what scope you want to do, but sometimes it's also taken a little bit more serious if an outside party does it. So just a few thoughts.
Well, the HR person for the county did say that she has RFPs and companies that she's used, and she could share that information with us if it's something that we wanted to look at in the future. But I mean, I do think we've talked about teacher compensation and looking at that. I mean, I think this could be as comprehensive as we could afford, if that's something that we see as being of value. But thanks for doing that first part.
If you are comparing administrators in schools, that a lot of that is online, so you don't have to pay for that. I can pull that information for you, but if you do want an outside market analysis, then I'll get with Dana Gibson with the county and see who else she's looked at.
All right, so now we're ready to talk about financials.
Than never. Okay, we have the June financial report, the July financial report, and typically about mid-month, we get the information from the trustee to produce the next report. So for the board meeting, you should have August as well. But tonight you have June and July. And I did do a memo summary for FY18 and for FY19. And I know it's late, and I can walk through that or whatever you would like me to do, or if you have questions. The good news is, of course, that you ended the year in the black. And revenue-wise, you were just a little bit short of collecting what was budgeted. 99.61% was collected. And on the expenditure side, the expenditures were underspent, which you definitely don't want them overspent. And I did go into a little bit of detail of what made up that number. There were a number of large amounts that were sort of planned to be carried over into fund balance. There was one particular almost $1 million item that shows up under transfers, and that had to do with some money that was borrowed from the general fund for the Capital 178 fund, and we were directed on what kind of accounting entries to use for that, and we did those. And what it resulted in is an expenditure that was budgeted, but it wasn't really spent, so that shows up as part of that 4.2 million underspent. So that almost $1 million of that was that one transaction. So the end result is that it did go back to fund balance, which was the intention because it was a loan. And then there were some other areas like vocational that underspent their budgets, and a portion of that was due to a grant that they were expecting, and correct me if I'm wrong, Stan, on this, I think that we talked about this, or Ron, a grant that they were expecting, and they borrowed the money out of fund balance, and then the grant came, and so then it was recorded, and then it looks like it was underspent. The other thing that happened during the year, if you remember, we had a discussion about this, about whenever you're planning to use fund balance, that fund balance that you approved needed to, accounting-wise, it needed to be included, the budget needed to be amended to include it under revenue and to include it under expenditures. And before I came, there was, remember the Q accounts, where there was money, you actually approved what was supposed to be spent. It just wasn't set up in revenue and expenditure. So it came directly out of fund balance. So all of those things together, you know, bring you where you're at, and you started the year in cash of $6,287,000. You ended the year at $5,165,000 in cash. As far as fund balance, you began the year at 8.7. The fund balance at the end of the year is 4.9. The net change was 3.8, and if you remember, you sort of budgeted to use 4.6 in fund balance, so you used a less than that. That leaves you going forward from FY18 with a 4.9 fund balance. The 3% test brings you a little over 3 million, so you have 1.9 million going forward. And then before we go into FY19, does anyone have any questions about FY18? Okay, seeing none. I was going to say when you had the $1.9 million, but wait, you're not going to spend it yet. Wait till we get to FY19 so I can explain that. Okay, so your cash flow model, you're starting with the ending cash balance of 5.165. And again, the first column is actual for July, and everything August through June is an estimate. Those estimates are based on what was collected this year, what was expended this year each month. And then I did a proration and added the additional revenue that we were planning on getting for the year. The big month that's added in is, I believe it was in December, because that's a large tax collection month. So you'll notice that your beginning and ending cash is the same figure, and that's assuming a balanced budget. And so hopefully you'll receive more revenue than we expected, and that number will be higher. But this is the baseline. Then when you look at fund balance, again, we're starting with the 4.9 million. We did budget to use some of fund balance in a carryover situation, some projects that were not completed in FY18. We plan to carry the money over, $443,000. If you subtract that and you subtract the reserve of 3%, the 3% test, you end up with $1.4 million, and that would be undesignated funds. And while I want to caution you that cash is different than fund balance, they're related. So as you look at going forward, potentially, if the need came up and you felt like if you were, when you make your decision at the next board meeting about the technology, whether you could afford to make some of these payments that we talked about, you've got $1.4 million in undesignated fund balance, but you kind of have to look at your cash, and if you spent that $1 million that we were just talking about, then your cash is going to be that much less. And, of course, you may get more revenue, but you may not. So it's kind of an estimate at that point. So I would caution you with that. I have done a separate, since I did this and published it for you, this one actually included a line in FY19 that showed you what would happen if you gave the loans for EESI, where you give it 1 month, you get it paid back the next month. And since that happened, Stan and I have talked, and he's worked with the state and the parties involved in that whole loan situation. And so far, it doesn't look like we're going to have to do the loan and payback. So I was worried about cash flow because in November you had been $91,000 in the hole. So I've done a new sheet that I can send to you without these figures in there. And actually I had it up here, but it's gone away again. But I just wanted to point out a couple things, and I know it's late. With those numbers taken out, you're good. Every month, the leanest month is September, and you have like a cash flow of $822,000. So that's pending, revenues coming in like we think and expenditures going out like we think, and that both of those can vary. If you had to do that $110,000 technology payment for September, you would still have $712,000 there. The other payment they talked about was in March, and that during everything from January on, your cash flow is not an issue. So that's not a worry. But again, if you do end up spending the full amount of the $1 million, which the bulk of it would hit in June, you just have to be cognizant of, where you are with your fund balance. So, so the good news is you're in the black, you got a little bit of breathing room, and the decisions that you made in the budget, while they were tough, it all worked out to the good of where you are financially anyway. So, does anyone have any questions? You're welcome. Okay, that's it.
Mr. Moore, you had asked for the discussion of financial reports, I think. Uh-huh. What you wanted the financial reports to show, was there?
Not tonight. We talked about that.
Sure.
I just want to say that.
In October?
I was asking for a summary that kind of summarized that, but tonight's not the night to go over that, so we can discuss that later.
Okay. Budget amendments? Any questions on those budget amendments? I think Ms. Ventura is here if there's any questions on the special ed one. If not, we can move that to consent. I know this will be our last meeting with Ms. Gagliano. She has a new job that she'll be starting. Congratulations on that. Could you give us kind of
Thank you.
just a brief overview of where the department's going to be as you leave, and the position that it's being left in? I know
Okay.
you've done a lot of work.
Well, staffing-wise, we have Ruth, who's in the supervisor position, and she was recently, or prior to that, in the finance benefits position. We just interviewed last week a person for that position, and she's going to be giving a 2-week notice, so she'll be coming aboard. She's actually, without giving her name yet, she's actually a tax auditor for the state, so very detailed person, and very upbeat and very excited to come and work. So that'll be good. So that'll be good help for Ruth. We have Brandon in the payroll position, who's been here for about a year now, a little bit less than that, and we recently filled his assistant position with Shelby, who was working with HR prior, and so she's in the finance office now. We also have Cherie, who's been in the accounts payable here for a while, so very solid with that. Mona, who's working on fixed assets and inventory and was also my assistant. She's still on board. And we had recently hired an accountant, and the job was not a fit for her, and unfortunately she gave a text to us this morning and let us know that she was not coming back. So that's unfortunate. The board did spend some money to have her trained by the VACO people before she left. So, that's going to be a challenge. But right now, that would be the only position that would be unfilled. And I spoke with Amanda. She may have interviewed some people that may fit that bill. So we're going to get on that. And then, of course, my position would be vacant, and I really don't know what to recommend as far as the act and all of that, because it's so sketchy about the schedule and the time frame. I'm sure Dr. Marzak's going to be sharing with you that we just received the results back from the Empower study that was done, that you paid for Skyward to come in and analyze the software, how we're using it, how we can use it better. Modules that you can bring on, or that you own, or that you can purchase, all of those things, and that's all in a comprehensive report that I'm sure he's planning on sharing with you soon. We're just working through the details of it now, because it was quite a hefty lot of recommendation. Good things. And also, when they were visiting here on site, they worked with each of the departments, and we were able to glean some really useful tools that you didn't have before for checking things and for running reports before payroll, after payroll. So a lot of extra tools that will be very useful in checking things and setting up processes. So I think that there were a lot of challenges when I came, and I appreciate the opportunity to work here and work with all of you. Very challenging. We did accomplish a lot, and we still have more challenges to go. So I'd be lying if I said that you didn't, but you're working through them, and so I wish you the best, and thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Gagliano. Do you want to identify what those challenges are?
At this hour, probably not.
That's fine. You can always do board at Murray K-12 and tell us what those are.
Okay.
Policies. We have the evaluation policy that was approved at the last board meeting. It's up for final adoption, and then there are several policies listed to be posted, and it looks like most of those are based on changes in the law. Any questions or any comments on any of those? If not, we will move those to consent. Oh, I'm sorry.
I would like to keep the board compensation out of the consent and put it on the regular. Because there's a couple changes I'd like to make to it.
Do you want to, yeah, we haven't gotten there yet, but it is. Yes, but we've only talked about 1 and 2. But you led right into number 3, so do you want to go ahead and go over the changes that you want to?
I would just like to see something put in there. I mean, this last year or so, we've had members come as late as 7:30 at night when the meeting starts at 6. So I think we need something in here about being on time or leaving early, or whatever. I mean, if you come after a certain time, you might as well stay home because the meetings, you're not going to get paid for the meeting. If you want to come free, come free. But I just don't think it's fair to anybody, and I don't think it's doing your job right to, meeting starts at 6, to come in at 7:30, 8 o'clock and expect to get full compensation. That's the only real problem I have with that.
Mr. Moore?
A couple of things, and I don't know, because I had requested that this be on here. I think it was me. It was probably need to come up anyway. Simply put, we need to do something with this, simply because there's now a conflict between our policy and what the county commission recently took on. Amanda, I know, put this together just to try to start to align that. I'm not sure where the board wants to go with this. All I know is I think I don't like sitting around with knowing that a policy is going to be incorrect and we know it. So I think we need to be talking about it, figuring it out. Clearly, this would have implications in a couple of different ways. Attendance would not be, if you follow the model that the county commission has gone, attendance does not have a factor in that. There would also be budgetary discussions on this. I believe this would be an increase, a considerable increase in what school board members get paid. And that would be a discussion we need to talk about. Not only is that something we want to do, or is that something that we can fund? I'd definitely be interested in what other board members say. I know the reason we originally went this direction to tie it to the county commission was to simply take it out of our hands so that we're no longer year after year talking about deciding when it needs to go up, what it needs to be. That was the original decision to go that direction. We may choose now that we need to separate it back out and come up with another structure, because that is what we'd have to do. If we're going to untie ourselves from what we did with the county commission, we would need to come up with a new structure for how we want to get paid. If we get paid at all, that's a choice we can all make on, but we need to do something other than just leave a policy that's no longer correct.
Well, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that policy goes into effect in October for them, doesn't it? For the commission. So, yes. So we probably we may need to take action at the September board meeting with whatever direction we choose to go.
Well, keep in mind, too, the county commission has to approve whatever compensation package. So if you change this policy, the county commission has to approve that.
Mr. Dudley.
Can somebody elaborate on what changes the commission has made?
I think I laid it out before. What they did was they essentially, maybe I'll get this right, they took and decided to make compensation for each county commissioner based on 1/22 of what the mayor makes. Being that the mayor's salary is based on a state model, the state sets it. They were essentially doing the same thing we did when we decided to take it out of our hands. They kind of took it out of their own hands and made it so that the state was now essentially setting what the county commissioners would make. I think that works out to $400 and some change right at $400 a month. It is no longer tied, again, this is what the county commission's done, it's no longer tied to attendance. They get that every month at like the last pay period of the month, regardless, based on however many meetings they attend. The one thing I think they voted on was that there would be some kind of public notice on their website showing who came to which meeting, so that there was at least some information out there for people to know whether people were going to the meetings or not. Which again is now in conflict with what we're doing, so that's kind of why we're talking about it.
Well, going along with what you said is the county commission took it out of their hands as for their own compensation, so the way I see this policy is we just took it out of our hands and gave it to the county commission. You know, I mean, I think everybody here is, I don't know how to put this, I'm not that eloquent, but just as intelligent and does just as much hard work as any county commissioner. So I have no problem with the compensation, other I would have to figure out how to fund it. But like I said, the only problem I have with this policy is I think there ought to be some penalty if you come in 2 hours late for a meeting, or no matter how late you want to put it on there.
Well, and one thing that some commissioners have said to me is, you know, going back to specially called meetings and budget season and I mean, your compensation will still be the same no matter how many meetings we have. We've tried to get to a place where we have a work session and a board meeting, but obviously during the budget season we have more meetings and zoning and other things that may be coming up. We may be meeting more than just twice a month on occasion, so there's no additional compensation for that. Ms. Kinzer?
I think Mr. Dudley's like was on first.
Well, I certainly agree with Mr. Penning's, you know. We spend just as much time trying to do our duties as the commission does. And so we deserve compensation along the same level. Now how we figure that out, I'm not sure. But with that said, as far as, you know, I don't want us to come down to trying to track every minute of whether somebody's here or whether they're a few minutes late or even had to leave a little early. A lot of our meetings, the initial part is based on we have time set aside for actions that doesn't require the board's attendance anyway. You know, we go through our normal deal of the pledge and all of that, our moment of silence, and then we have most times have a program from some of our students presented and acknowledgments and stuff. So I don't want to see us penalizing somebody. You know, there's times that the traffic is the issue, the reason why somebody's late. You know, and then there's other times it might be illness related. But I think each and everybody, regardless of the shortcomings they have in meeting attendance, far more make up time, that time throughout the month on doing other things that are school board related. And so I know Kristen down there, her duties as far as being chairman, you know, she spends a lot more time than just at the meetings. So I don't really want to see a whole lot of change. I just would ask that every board member try and be here when we have meetings, be on time, and then try and be prepared to stay till the meetings are over. But I mean, this evening's a prime example. It's already 11 minutes after 11. So whatever shortcomings we may have had last month, we've far exceeded tonight.
I agree, Mr. Dudley.
I'll be quick too. I would hate to penalize somebody. I know Joanna's a good, she would text us. One thing I would suggest, and I don't know if it needs to be in the policy or whatever, but I think that we had a couple of meetings in the winter last year where we only had 6, 2 months in a row, 6. So, in some cases, we didn't really know if someone was coming or not. I think Joanna usually texts us if she's stuck in traffic. She lets you know. We know if someone's going to leave because of a family thing. I just think that, there shouldn't be an excused and unexcused absence. This is not school. We're all adults and we're all here for the right reasons, and I don't want to have to take attendance. One thing that we do is we are transparent. Everybody in the county can see who's here. And so we don't have to publish who's here. They just they can look on, and we take roll, and they know. They don't do that. They don't, the commission doesn't do that. So that they are going to publish their attendance. So I wouldn't want, I'm like Mr. Dudley, I would not like to penalize them, but I would like that whoever is going forward is chairing or whatever, that they know who's going to be there if they cannot be there, so you know just what to expect if you've only got 6 there. And we sat a couple of times waiting for people to get here to get a quorum, and that really looks kind of bad, I think, to the community. But anyway, I don't have, I know the first TSBA thing that Donna and Nathan and I went to, we happened to be sitting at a table with the Knoxville board members. They make $2,000 a month. And we're like, what? What? But that's just what they said, that they did that because they just felt like the standard compensation, that's what they got. Now, this week I'm going to go to 2 different schools to do interviews. We do things outside of these meetings that it's just part of it, and I'm glad to do it. But I think we earn it. I think that we earn as much as the commissioner does.
I remove my objection. I think it's fine just the way it is.
I'm going back. Did our policy previously have a different compensation for the chair? Oh, it didn't. Okay. Recommendations on this, I'm okay with the way it's written, as long as my idea would be to just continue to mirror what the county commission does. They don't have the part about it's based on attendance records. I would take the highlighted portion out, is what I would recommend. Again, that's up to anyone else. I would, however, like to see us, for the state of the public, to go ahead and find some way to post just a list of who was at each meeting. We used to do this when we first came on the board. It could be as simple as a spreadsheet that's posted. I think for the public to know that, and honestly, to speak to the other thing about people that are late or not here, honestly, that's between them and the voters of their district. The voters can be aware of information like that spreadsheet, and then in a couple of years, they can make that choice. If they feel like they're not being represented by that person, that's the process we go through. Unfortunately, that's kind of the remedy we have on that. Otherwise, we are adults, and we all signed up for this, and I would hope everyone takes it serious and shows up as much as they can.
And I think on our minutes, it actually says who all is attended and whatnot, but are you wanting something? I know before we had an actual spreadsheet that had like each meeting and marked kind of a
running thing,
tally.
A PDF or something where somebody could very easily look into some total.
So like a check.
Would
They're
that-
here, check. Yeah.
Would that be something, Ms. Shirley, that you could
Yeah, that'd be simple.
do for us?
No.
I think on the website, it used to be by each individual board member's like name or picture. There was like a profile or attendance or something like that.
Yeah, it could be a Google document.
Okay.
It would
Okay.
be pretty easy to do.
All right. Right, it did. Okay. Dr. Marsack?
I thought he had something.
I thought you were raising your hand.
Oh, no, you jumped in and talked about what I was gonna talk about. On the board minutes, at the beginning, it states who's at the meetings. But yeah, Ms. Johnson and I can definitely work together to create some kind of document that goes on the board side that shows attendance. Not a problem.
Sounds good. So is everyone okay with us moving that to consent? Okay. Next, is the dress code. There, oh, sorry.
I'm
Yes, sir.
sorry. I do want to mention one thing on that. There may be a discussion, this may come up later about, since there is a time sensitive, I would, however, I would personally not like to waive the public comment period on that one. I think that is something that if people want to go through the 1 month posting on that, even if that puts us outside of.
On the dress code?
No, I'm going back to the other one. Even if that puts us outside of there's like a gap there in our policy not aligning with the county commission, I think it's fair to the public to have some input on that.
So what will our policy be during that interim period, though? I mean,
Trust me, I've struggled that.
But
I've been struggling with that one because
I know that we
personally, I
wanted
just feel like
government
that's something we shouldn't. I don't feel comfortable waiving that, although I understand the basis for that. I'd be open for other opinions on that, but that's a struggle I have.
Can we have this policy say effective October 1st?
We wouldn't have been paid anyway because we're on a quarterly payment system anyway, so I'm not sure it's really a big impact.
The board actually could set aside your policy with a two-thirds vote, so you could do a vote to just pay yourselves whatever you want to pay yourselves in that gap month, and then get the policy time to circulate.
How much money we got in fund balance?
Because we have to come up with the funding too, as the other part. I would think between now and the meeting, we need to have some discussions on that. Anyway, that's just my thing. I would rather not waive that. That looks horrible in my mind.
Okay. All right. Sounds good. Ms. Morency, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I just want to let everyone know, I think I heard that it's about 35,000 difference.
It would be compared to what was paid for the whole district, for you all last year, it'd be $35,500.
More
Yes.
than what was paid? What
Yes.
was paid for the whole district?
Last year, the total was $17,585. This would increase to $53,157. I'm not sure what was budgeted, but it's a $35,572 increase.
I think the line item is 33,000, so it would be that figure over and above that. So I'm thinking we can take it from, just write us a check.
I just wanted everyone to know, be aware of that.
But I think the board compensation in the line item is 33,000, something like that now. So it would be more, yes, but not 50-something thousand more. Yeah, about 17,000 more. And we've already gone 3 months. Well, July, August, September before that started, so it won't even be that much difference.
Sounds good. Next item is the dress code. There was an issue that had come up regarding, particularly with elementary schools. I don't know, Dr. Woodard, if this is something that you can talk to the elementary school principals about. I know we had gotten an email about, 3 inches on the shorts and that kind of thing. Maybe some issues with leggings. If maybe what the principals' thoughts are on if they're having trouble enforcing the dress code, particularly with the elementary schools. We can just follow up on that later. Next is the nepotism policy. I had put that on there again because I have a question. Do we have to have one per state law?
There's several TCA codes that are in there. I don't know that we have to have a nepotism policy. There's other counties that don't.
Okay.
But if you don't, then it can become a nightmare sometimes. A county, for instance, that I talked to when he went there and took that county over superintendent, seemed like everybody in the central office was related to each other because they didn't have that policy. So whether you have to have it or not, I would suggest that you do have some form of nepotism policy.
Do you have is it included on the application?
Yes.
And is that information then sent to Dr. Marzak, I guess, so he can make a final decision?
Right. There's a question on the application asking if you are related to a county commissioner, a school board member, someone in the system. And then if, as the policy reads, if that person is related to an administrator in the school system, then that's when Dr. Marzak would be made aware.
Okay. It
But it's
seems
not
like
just
you
if anybody's related to anybody, it would only be for an administrator.
right. Well, it just seems like we've had some hires recently where that's been an issue, but the hire, it seems, has already been made, and the notification is provided to us after the decision's been communicated to us that a hire has been made, or communicated to the public. So I don't really feel like, quite frankly, the spirit of this policy is being adhered to at this point.
We have had one. I'm assuming you're referring to Ryan Jackson's wife.
I was actually talking about Santa Fe as well.
And that has been given to you. Notice was given to
Right,
you.
but we actually got notice of that on like Thursday. We got notice of the hire on Tuesday. So they're not at the same school, but it's still under the way that the policy is written right now. We still have to be provided notice of it. So.
Because it actually, I mean, it's not just hired, it's considered for. So I guess that would be, if that's not appropriate, that if that's too far, I mean, again, I don't know. With Ms. Parker, I'm the same way. If we're going to have it, we need to either follow it, and if it's not appropriate, we need to get rid of it. And I think that's where she was going with it. And I would agree, if it says we're supposed to be done when it's considered, then we need to be informed then, and we need to have a procedure for how we're informed, whether it be at a meeting or by email or whatever that is. And if not, then we need to just get rid of the policy.
Dr. Marzak?
Yeah, and not getting you that notification is my mistake. That's a ball that was dropped, and that's completely my fault, and I take full responsibility for it. If we're gonna look at amending this policy, I would stick to the spirit of law of 49.2202, which is, if you look at the end of the line of the nepotism policy, it has a number 1 on it, and then it refers to 49.202, section A3. And basically what it talks about is the relation of school system employees to elected officials, which are school board members, county commissioners. It doesn't make any relation to hired employees, except when you get down to section 3. It says this subdivision shall not be construed to prohibit 2 or more relatives from working for the LEA. If 2 or more employees who are relatives are within the same direct line of supervision, or become within the same direct line of supervision by marriage or promotion, then the director of schools shall attempt to resolve this issue by transfer of one of the employees. If the director finds that the transfer is not feasible or not in the best interest of students, then an alternate evaluation plan shall be devised for one of the employees. So basically it talks about who's evaluating whom. So obviously a spouse cannot evaluate a spouse. So in that case, if it wasn't feasible to be moved, then somebody else would evaluate that subordinate spouse. So I would say if we're gonna make a change, take out just the word administrator and leave it strictly up to elected officials. And of course, I can't hire any relatives to work in the system, because basically everybody eventually rolls up to me as a superintendent of schools. But that's what I would recommend.
I would just say I'm not comfortable with that. I mean, I think the administrator part, the issue that I think that exists with this is that even if there is not a direct evaluation of, and we'll take, for example, you mentioned Dr. Jackson's wife. She is being, I assume, evaluated by the principal at Mount Pleasant Middle School. But it's my understanding that if Dr. Jackson is the lead principal, then I would assume he is evaluating the person that's evaluating his wife. And that just seems like that it's in the interest of transparency, in the interest of not looking like there's a conflict of interest, that certainly invites that type of discussion for our system. And this isn't the first time that we've had administrators in our system who have had spouses that were also teachers. I just don't know that. I wasn't on the board when Mr. Hickman was here, but I believe his wife actually had to be transferred to a different school.
She had to be transferred, right. Yes,
So.
she was. It was with tears in front of the faculty, yes.
Gotcha. And the reason, and the key word is direct line of supervision. So evaluation
Well, I will just say that when that particular hire was made, I think that there was, as I was informed, there was a meet and greet for Dr. Jackson's wife, which is great. However, I think there's plenty of teachers that have gotten hired after the school year started that didn't get a meet and greet. So again, that just makes it seem like there is an extra layer of, there's a special relationship there. And so I'm not saying that that exists, I'm just saying that the appearance is there, and even though I just don't think this policy was followed. And I would hope that if we're going to have this policy, that it will be followed in the future, and we won't be put in a position where we have to answer for those decisions.
Yes, ma'am, you're exactly right.
Dr. Woodard, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Chair Parker. I just want to provide some clarification. All the evaluations for principals are handled directly by me, and I conduct those twice a year. Typically, I start those in October and finish up by December, and then we start the second round somewhere around March and finish up in May. But I do all the evaluations for principal twice a year. I directly do those. The role of Ryan Jackson with regard to being a lead principal, his role is to lead and mentor with regards to innovation, STEM, STEAM, and provide coaching and support to the middle school and high school principal along the lines of STEM and STEAM innovation. That's pretty much what his role is, and that's kind of what he does and what he is doing in that capacity. Just wanted to kind of clarify. The other case that you mentioned with Santa Fe, Randy Hubble is the new principal of Santa Fe Unit School. He was previously at Lewisburg Middle School. Comes to us highly recommended, was a reward school principal, level 5 school principal for a number of years. But his wife does work at Culleoka Unit School. She's an assistant principal. So he's a principal at Santa Fe, and his wife is an assistant principal at Culleoka. So there is some separation, and there's no supervision of him over her, and no connection there other than spousal. But just want to kind of clarify that. And again, that is something that should be reported to you sooner, so I take responsibility for that also, and something I'll be mindful of with the hiring. Thank you.
Thanks. If we also have on there annual review for new board members. This is just a process that comes up pretty much every month. We have a section for everyone to review of the policies. A couple of years ago, we went through pretty thoroughly all of our policies and adapted them to the recommendations of TSBA. And but at any time, those policies can still be revised. So, if there's any suggestions on a better way to actually review, 40 or 50 policies a night, certainly amenable to listening to those. So, but if there is nothing else, we are ready to adjourn. All right, thanks.